The torches lining the silent corridor hissed and crackled, spitting pitch-black smoke that drifted like torn mourning veils across the vaulted stone. Eddard Stark followed their uncertain glow past rows of mailed Lannister guards, whose crimson cloaks shimmered like pools of blood in the half-light. They held their halberds rigidly upright, but their eyes betrayed a living heat, the smolder of men prepared to strike if the wrong breath was drawn. Ned kept his own breathing slow, steady, the way he once had on winter nights in the Wolf's Wood when every exhale of frost might give a stag's position away. At the end of the passage, a pair of towering oak doors, painted with the crowned stag of House Baratheon, stood ajar. Cold air leaked through the gap, laced with a coppery tang of death and something older. Something leached from stone. The smell of a keep that remembered too many corpses. Ned slid between the doors and knelt. King Robert lay upon a bier of black wood, candles flickering around him in a halo of soft light. He had always been immense, larger than rumor and louder than thunder. But death had stolen the brawl from his shoulders, leaving only the shell of a giant. Bruises bloomed purple beneath his unkempt beard, where the boar's tusks had struck bone, and the royal velvet that covered his chest was stained deep, near black at the heart. They had dressed him in the very armor he had worn on the trident, though the clasps sat loosely now. Ned bowed his head. "You were the hammer that broke the dragon," he whispered, the words catching in his throat, and the song of summer in a kingdom that had forgotten laughter. He had not meant to say so much. Silence pressed back. A candle guttered and died. Somewhere outside, across the great courtyard, the bells that had been tolling since sundown faltered, then rose again in a ragged chorus that shivered the window panes. He rose only when Grand Maester Pycelle's sandals scraped behind him. "Lord, pardon his grace if I may call you that already." The old man's jowls quivered as though the syllables weighed more than his lips could lift. Ned turned. Even now the title felt like an ill-fitted cloak, a borrowed mantle still smelling of another man's sweat. "It is not yet decided," he answered softly. Pycelle bowed his bald head until the fringe of white hair brushed his robe. "The realm will look to you before the sun sets again, and wisely, if I may say so. His last decree named you protector. In times such as these?" He let the words trail into a wheeze, inviting assent. Ned offered none. They stood together in uneven quiet. A fly droned near Robert's gauntlet, stumbled against steel, and vanished. At last, Pycelle produced a small vial stoppered with dragon glass. Essence of nightshade to slow the decay. "I will see him kept properly until the Septons begin the rites." His eyes glimmered with self-importance. "When the realm is ready, his grace shall lie in state beneath the crystals of the great Septat, as befitting a king." Ned nodded. Yet in his mind, he saw a different burial, on a windswept barrow, in the hills of the Stormlands, where green grass rolled like seas under silver clouds. Robert had spoken of such a resting place on the long ride south. Simple, honest earth above, banners snapping in the salt wind off Shipbreaker Bay. But now the decision belonged to other men, and Robert's voice lay silent, entombed within an iron cage of ribs. Outside the silent room, the waking world grew restless. Bronze-coated horns sounded from the battlements like wolves howling through tin, announcing dawn's first gray smear over the Red Keep. Cersei Lannister would already be summoning her children, braiding the golden hair of her young king, whispering soft poisons. Stannis, somewhere across the narrow sea of courtiers and courtesies, was no doubt sharpening parchments as keenly as swords. And Renly glided through the corridors in a cloud of perfumed retainers, his smile brighter than polished copper yet hiding some deeper edge. Ned pressed 2 fingers to Robert's cold forearm, the hairs there stiff with drying blood. "Rest well, old friend. I will do what honor demands." The promise felt both frail and colossal, as the pillars of the Hall of 100 Hearths. The bells of King's Landing sang all morning, and the city answered in clamor. Bakers burned their loaves for leaning too long at windows. Fishermen forgot their nets to stand gawking on the docks, and in Flea Bottom the whores wept, some from honest grief, some from honest grief, some from fear that the Golden Lions would raise taxes on their sordid trade. Septons led ragged processions, chanting prayers for the soul of the warrior who had toppled the Mad King. Above them the red keep towered, its high walls bright under dawning sun, yet each brick seemed darker, as though mortared with sorrow. When Eddard Stark entered the council chamber, every gaze fell upon him. Lord Renly reclined at the foot of the table, idly rolling a carved stag through his fingers. Across from him, Petyr Baelish traced patterns on the polished wood, the ghost of a smile perched behind his beard. Varys alone wore open grief, his powdered cheeks streaked from weeping. "Lord Stark," Renly began, voice low as if to a skittish horse, "we are met to chart the course of the realm. Forgive our haste, but matters of succession wait for no man." Ned took the seat at the head, conscious of how Lannister crimson gleamed from the tabards of the 3 guards stationed within reach. "Robert is scarcely cold," he reminded them. "This council convenes to ensure the city's peace until the lords paramount gather. No more, no less." "And yet," Littlefinger said, tapping a silver quill against his chin, "peace rests upon a name. Best speak it sooner than later." A hush. Renly leaned forward, green eyes sparkling. "The city murmurs already. The small folk call for the lion cub. The queen places a crown upon Joffrey even now." Ned's knuckles whitened around the arm of his chair. He recalled the boy, Joffrey's cruel smiles, the haughty tilt of his chin, and remembered Jon Arryn's final, desperate words, "The seed is strong. Gods, let honor find me a path through this." "We have Robert's will." He unfurled the parchment, the wax still bearing the stag unbroken. "It names me protector until his rightful heir come of age." It was witnessed by all present save the queen. "Her Grace disputes nothing," Varys breathed silkily. "She assures me the boy is eager to rely upon your sage guidance." Renly's laugh cracked like a whip. "Guidance? Joffrey lops heads on a whim. That whelp is no more fit to wear a crown than I am to birth children." He tossed the carved stag onto the table where it spun before falling flat. "Names make kingdoms. Let the lords decide while blood runs hot and steel stays sheathed." Littlefinger's eyes flicked toward Ned. "A king beloved is a kingdom secured. You, Lord Stark, have titles enough: great uncle to half the north, hero of the rebellion, friend of a fallen monarch. The realm might rally behind your standard." Ned felt the room constrict. "I am no king. Robert chose me as regent, not ruler. Chosen, yes. But regents fall when kings rise." Renly pushed back his chair, the legs scraping. "Unless the regent himself is crowned." The council watched, a tableau carved in wax. Outside, a distant roar swelled. The crowd gathering in Visinius Hill, 1,000 strong. Rumor moved faster than ravens in King's Landing, and already they must be shouting for blood, or for bread, or for some promise that tomorrow would look like yesterday. Ned rose. "Summon the High Septon d'Adoir. Send ravens to Winterfell, to Riverrun, to Highgarden, to the Eyrie. The lords will come. Until then, no man speaks of crowns. No, Druin. But every man dreams of them," Littlefinger murmured. That night, while fires guttered in alleyways and rats scurried through abandoned stalls, Eddard Stark walked the ramparts alone. King's Landing sprawled beneath him like a bloated beast, its 1,000 lanterns flickering in the breeze off Blackwater Bay. The harbor bristled with ships, swan-prowed galleys from Braavos, squat Dorndromans, even a Lysine pleasure barge, whose colored silks drooped in mourning half-mast, though inside Ned could hear the faint trilling of flutes. Grief wore masquerades in this city. Tears were sold as easily as wine. He stopped at a crenelle to stare toward the sept, its great crystals aglow. Robert's body would lie there come dawn, and the kingdom would line the streets with flowers. The thought should have comforted him, but only an ache spread in his chest. Footsteps approached. Barristan Selmy bowed. "Lord Eddard, forgive the intrusion." "No intrusion, Sir Barristan. Walk with me." They paced in silence until the old knight spoke. "I served 3 kings and 1 madman. I tell you true, none bore so large a heart as Robert Baratheon. Yet a heart alone cannot steady a crown." "Nay." Ned glanced at the man whose white cloak billowed like moonlit snow. "You see the storm gathering. The wind shifts." Selmy's lined face was a map of furrows. Stannis claims seniority by right, Renly by popularity, the boy Joffrey by proximity. Each is armed with half a kingdom and hungry for the other half. Whose banner shall the king's guard defend when swords are drawn? Honor binds you to the throne, not the man. A throne is wood and metal, Lord Stark. It cannot bleed. Yet I have sworn, and I will keep that oath if my own blood must pay for it. Tell me, when the lords meet, will they set you upon that throne? Ned did not answer. He could not. Instead, he looked to the north, where beyond the city walls, the King's Road vanished into darkness and memory. Somewhere past fields and forests, Winterfell stood beneath the first snow of coming winter, and his sons honed practice swords before a heart tree older than the realm. What would Robb think of his father crowned? Would Bran ever believe his gentle stories by firelight again, if he learned that honor could lift a man higher than loyalty demanded? Selmy rested a gauntleted hand upon the parapet. A king who wears reluctance as a cloak may yet warm a kingdom if his heart is true. Ned said, the word of frost crystal on the wind. 2 days later, the lords began to arrive. First came Sir Mace Tyrell, cheeks rosy as ripe apples, his column of green and gold knights trailing banners stitched with golden roses. Behind him thundered Lord Mathis Rowan and Lord Randall Tarley, grim as granite. They poured coin into taverns and piety into the septs, greasing every hinge a decision might swing upon. From the Vale rode Jan Royce encased in burnished bronze, and with him the gray-winged falcons of Arryn. They camped along the Street of Flower, arguing long into the night in a round tower, borrowed from the crown. Jon Arryn named Stark his brother, Royce declared at dawn. By the spirits of the first men, so shall I. But others were less certain. The raven from Riverrun carried Lord Hoster's seal of silver trout, but no pledge. We await wider counsel, it read in Cat's careful hand. Dorne's prince made no reply at all. And from Casterly Rock, silence so vast it seemed to swallow half the sky. On the fourth night, Ned met Renly in the Godswood of the Red Keep. Beneath the great black-barked oak, where crisp leaves rustled like distant surf, moonlight painted Renly's boyish face a ghostly white. You are not your brother, Ned began. Renly smiled, teeth flashing. Nor do I wish to be. Robert saw only the next tilt, the next cask to empty. I see tomorrow, and I see a kingdom starving for a young king who loves it. His hand brushed Ned's sleeve. Stand beside me, Lord Stark. An alliance of North and South, the hearts of the realm, will break the Lannisters before their gold can buy more swords. Ned shook his head. Stannis stands ahead of you, if not in your heart. I will not steal his right. Renly's eyes hardened. Rights fail when courage does. Stannis will not charm the masses. He will grind them into obedience. Muster behind me and I shall see Joffrey sent to some far sept to pray out his days. Stannis can keep Dragonstone and brood upon principle. Ned stepped back. I have made my answer. Then you doom yourself to choose between boy and zealot. The younger Baratheon turned, cloak swirling. When the tide rises, Lord Stark, do not be found grasping at driftwood. The next morning Cersei Lannister came to court in widow's white. Her pale dress sewn with seed pearls that shimmered like tears, none believed she shed. Joffrey marched before her, gold crown perched amid curls, cheeks pink with triumph. The boy mounted the iron throne, unsheathed lion's tooth, and sat astride the edge as though expecting praise for the daring. Lord Stark, the queen called, her voice ringing clear across the hall. You stand as protector. Present my son to the realm as king, that he may confirm your title and keep faith with his late father's will. The hall grew still. Faces watched from every tier. Merchants in silks, hedge knights in patched surcoats, highborn ladies hiding behind feathered fans. Varys drifted like a shadow among them. Littlefinger leaned against a pillar counting heartbeats. Ned mounted the dais, his steps echoing like distant drums. He stopped before the throne, looked into eyes green as wildfire. Jon Arryn died for the truth, he remembered. I will not let his death be vain. He turned to the queen. Prince Joffrey's claim is not uncontested. Until the Great Council rules, there can be no enthronement. Murmurs rippled. Cersei's smile contracted by a hair. Your concern is noted, Lord Stark. Yet a realm without a crowned monarch is a realm adrift. Better adrift than anchored in falsehood. The words left his tongue before Prudence could snatch them back. It was as if the gods themselves had spoken through him, and now waited to see what price they would demand for such candor. Joffrey's lips twisted. I should take your head for that. The blade flashed, catching torchlight, but Ser Barristan stepped forward, white cloak flaring, and placed a steady hand upon the boy's wrist. The Lord Protector speaks from care for the realm, Selmy intoned. A king must rule with justice, not wrath. The queen's eyes flicked to the king's guard, then to her brother Jaime, who lounged against the dais' marble rail, fingers drumming ivory. Whatever message passed between them was silent as a cat's footfall, yet deadly as a snake's kiss. Ned bowed stiffly and withdrew, pulse hammering in his ears. One misstep, one breath sharper than needful, and swords would have sung. Honor's path was narrowing to a blade's edge, and beneath it yawed chasms of fire. Night brought fresh torments. In Maegor's Holdfast the air turned thick despite the autumn chill, and Ned lay sleepless upon a feather mattress that felt harder than Winterfell's floors. Visions stalked his heavy eyelids, Robert's husky laughter echoing down an empty hall, the Mad King's flames devouring Lord Rickard, Lyanna's hand slipping from his even as the scent of roses remained. Each memory pressed upon him like mailed fists. When dawn pried fingers of gold beneath the shutters, Ned rose and donned the sable cloak embroidered with the direwolf. He buckled the sword ice across his back, though the blade's great weight seemed to belong to history more than steel. Outside, a sea of banners filled the outer yard. Tyrell roses beside the white falcon of Arryn, the stone hand of Baratheon, encircled by the stag of Storm's End, and scattered among them the grey deerwolves brought by riders from the north. Men spoke in clusters, gesturing toward the Tower of the Hand where ravens circled like omens. Ned mounted the steps of the Queen's Tower. At the top Ser Boros Blount barred his passage, but one hard stare from the north's cold eyes opened the way. In the antechamber, Cersei waited by a marble window, golden hair unbound so that it flowed over her shoulders like molten sunlight. My lady, Ned began. No courtesies. She tapped the sill. Look there. He followed her gaze. Across the river, the far bank's reeds bent under a sweep of wind, but it was the field beyond that caught his breath. Ranks of men in black and gold moved like a tide of molten ore. Lannister spears, thousands deep. Gold cloaks of the City Watch manned the walls, but their orange banners were lost amid the blaze of Casterly Rock's colors. My father sends tribute, the Queen said. A father's grief for a fallen son-in-law. Perhaps you believe he intends mischief. Ned's hand clenched. He marches an army into the capital without leave. That is mischief enough. Protection. Cersei's laugh was low. This city is full of swords pledged to every whisper on the wind. A wise woman keeps her children where steel may find any throat raised against them. Your children may remain safe without butchery. One day you will learn that safety is writ upon steel alone. Her eyes narrowed. My lord, release the boys crowned. Let the seven judge whose blood is pure and whose is treasonous. Now, Ned felt as though ice cracked beneath his boots. If he named Joffrey false, he risked shattering the fragile League of Lords assembling outside. But if he yielded, he delivered the kingdom to a tyranny of incest and deceit. I will not trade truth for peace, he said at last. Then you will have neither. Cersei turned away. Conversation done, she dismissed him with a silent sweep of hair. Ned descended the tower, each step heavier, as though the stones themselves tried to hold him fast to spare him from what came next. The Great Council convened on the 7th day after Robert's death, under banners draped black in mourning. High lords filled the dragon pit, its fallen domes and broken ribs of steel forming a crown of ruin around the assembly. The sky above was a perfect blue, unmarred by cloud, as though the gods wished to see clearly the fate of men. Lord Renly spoke first, voice ringing across the shattered amphitheater. He praised Robert's might and mourned his passing, then raised his own claim to the throne, offering golden coins to small folk widows, and promise of lower levies to every farmer from the reach to the fingers. Applause scattered through the stands, though some quieted when Lord Stannis' envoy read the lineages delineating his elder birth. But when Eddard Stark stepped upon the cracked sandstone dais, silence fell complete. He wore no crown, only a plain circlet of bronze that once belonged to Brandon the Builder. Loaned by House Stark-Smith in Winterfell many centuries past, the direwolf of his cloak ruffled in the harbor wind. "My lords," he began, voice soft yet carrying. "Robert Baratheon was a brother to me, not in blood but in bond stronger than steel. He raised me when sorrow cast my house into shadow, and together we toppled a tyrant. I would sooner kneel than usurp the birthright of his lawful offspring. Yet a greater bond binds us all." Ned drew ice and planted the tip upon a fractured stone. "The bond of truth." A murmur rippled. Ned continued, "Truth is not a choice fashioned in the dark. It is a dawn no man can delay. I ask this counsel. Examine the blood of the boy Joffrey, the girl Myrcella, the lad Tommen. Measure it against the seed that has sprung in Baratheon fields for 500 years. If the boughs do not match the root, can we pretend the fruit is true?" "None." Cersei's gasp, sharp as crushed glass, echoed through the pit. Lannister knights shifted hands to sword hilts. Across the sand, Tyrells and Tarleys exchanged uneasy glances. "I hold no desire for crowns," Ned said. "Yet should this council find the line of Baratheon severed, know that winter marches while we dither. A kingdom at war will not see harvest. 1,000 widows will curse the names of all highborn. Daider." He raised ice. "If your honors deem me fit to mend what treachery has torn, I shall reign only until the next of age to hold the crown with justice and mercy both. On that day, I will surrender crown and blade alike." A roar shook the decrepit walls, rolling like distant thunder. Lords leapt to their feet. Some shouted for Stannis, some for Renly, some for the Wolf King. But others, many others, did not shout at all. They watched Ned Stark standing alone beneath an open sky, sword reflecting sunlight cruel and bright, and they weighed the measure of truth against the gold that clinked in their purses. When dawn came again, ravens burst from the dragon pit, carrying scrolls to every corner of Westeros. Eddard of House Stark, Lord of Winterfell, guardian of the realm, is proclaimed king until the matter of succession be proven before gods and men. 10 great lords had signed, and 24 bannermen forced their marks beside those. Within hours horns blared from the city walls and the bells rang anew. The coronation itself took place in the great sept of Baelor Dot. 7 crystal windows burned with morning sun, raining shattered rainbows over the kneeling crowds. The high septon raised a coronal of hammered silver wrought with dire wolves and falling petals of winter rose, symbol both of the north and of the Lund-bound wolf to dragon across a bed of blood and snow. Ned bowed his head. The metal settled like hoarfrost upon his brow. Whispers whispered. Stark the king in the south, Winter's shepherd, the quiet wolf. Arya wriggled between halberds to peer at her father, eyes alight with wonder. Sansa clasped Lady Yrene Tyrell's hand and wept soundlessly. Bran, still 1,000 leagues away, dreamt of ravens that night. Cersei watched from a screened gallery, face carved from ivory. Jaime lounged beside her, smug as a cat licking cream. Yet even he tightened his grip on the hilt of his golden sword when the High Septon bade the new king stand and face his people. Ned spoke plainly, his oaths shaped by the North's plain ways. He vowed to guard the realm's children, rich and poor, with the same ferocity he guarded his own, to keep the peace while summer's last warmth remained, to suffer no falsehood in king or council. His words spread through the sept like slow-moving ice, chilling some hearts, steadying others. At the feast that followed, troops of singers wove songs of the trident, of Eddard's ride through the Tearstone hills, of Lyanna's crown of winter roses. Roasted boar and honeyed hams filled trenchers, and casks of arbor gold emptied into jeweled cups faster than pages could carry them. Renly laughed and congratulated anyone within bowshot. Stannis, arrived from Dragonstone hours before, drank water and watched with eyes like tempered iron. Tyrell knights danced with Ashford maidens. Rivers of discourse coursed through the halls, each eddy carrying rumor of alliances unformed. Ned sat upon a modest dais at the hall's far end, eyes sheathed behind him, crown glinting dully. Caitlin beside him squeezed his hand beneath the table, her smile brave yet brittle. "You have set a wolf among lions, my love," she whispered. "May the gods keep you from their sharper teeth." Across the city walls, the camps of Tywin Lannister sprawled like molten ore cooling upon the plain. Inside a crimson pavilion, the Lord of Casterly Rock read the Raven's scroll thrice, then held it to the brazier's flame. Gold danced in his pupils. "So the Northman wears a crown," he murmured. "Let us see how long the snow can stand beneath a summer sun of Lannister gold." His fist closed, scattering black ash. In Winterfell, ravens arrived with the dawn, their feathers ruffled by the long flight south to north. Robb Stark strode from the great hall into the biting air, clutching the parchment, the wax-stark direwolf unbroken. Beside him, Theon Greyjoy whistled a low, admiring note. "King in King's Landing," Theon said. "That makes you prince, does it not? Or heir apparent?" "I must polish my manners." Robb stared to the horizon, where snow clouds bruised the sky. "Father never sought crowns. If he wears one now, the realm must be desperate indeed." Maester Luwin pulled his cloak tighter. "Desperate times, young lord, can forge unlooked-for destinies." Robb's jaw clenched. "Then I pray the gods guide my father's steps better than men ever could." Far beyond, on the next southern edge, a lone rider on a black courser spurred hard toward the twins. A silver trout emblazoned his cloak. Sir Edmure Tully bared his teeth against the wind. He carried letters sealed by his sister and another by his dying father, urging Lord Walder Frey to declare for the King Stark or face the fury of river and north combined. The gray water mists curled like ghosts around him, swallowing hoofbeats one by one. And in Casterly Rock's deep forges, hammers rang night and day, shaping new steel for a future written in crimson gold. Tywin scribes penned letters by the score, summoning bannermen, promising plunder, reminding each lord of debts unpaid. From Old Town to the crumbling towers of the crag, lords woke to the lion's call and wondered which throne they had sworn to centuries ago. The first snow of the year blew across the wall that same night, sifting through black spruce and covering the watch's ramparts in pale dust. Jon Snow, cloaked in crow's black, looked south and felt a pull in his chest he could not name. Somewhere beyond mountains and leagues of forest, his father stood encircled by enemies wearing smiles. Ghost padded to his side, red eyes gleaming in the witchlight of dawn. Jon laid a hand upon the direwolf's head. "He will need us," he whispered. Back in King's Landing, the crown weighed heavier each hour. Ned sat in the solar that had been Robert's, staring at a scroll from Highgarden that pledged 14,000 swords should the king call. Opposite lay a message from Stannis, terse, demanding investigation and recognition. Renly's envoy promised support on condition of marriage to Margaery Tyrell. Even Robb's letter urged swift justice for the Lannister threat. Ned rubbed tired eyes. If truth was dawn, he thought, why does the light blind? Littlefinger entered without knocking, carrying ledgers. "Your Grace, taxes must be reviewed if we are to feed these new camps. Could we levy a small duty on Dornish wine?" "Do it," Ned said. "But no more than 2 coppers on each cask. The poor drink cheap. I. Sign. And subsidies for winter grain?" Petyr sighed theatrically. "The crown bleeds coin it does not possess. Sell the crown's silks if we must. The city will not starve while I sit warm." Littlefinger's sidelong gaze lingered. "Such mercy may earn you love, but perhaps not victory." "Love buys time," Ned answered. "Time buys strategy." He did not know whether that was true, yet he clung to it as a man lost beneath ice clings to the memory of fire. Night fell once more over the Red Keep. In the Queen's Tower, Cersei pressed a ruby-hilted dagger into Joffrey's small hand. "A king must rule in the shadows before he can rule in the sun," she whispered. "Trust no word but mine, no guard but Sir Boros. And remember, the wolf's throat is soft beneath the fur." Below them, in the bowels of the castle, Veres moved soundlessly through passages known only to mice and men who wore many masks. He listened at doors where Lannister captains plotted. He slipped messages through cracks where Baratheon retainers argued. And he smiled a spider's slow smile. In the end, he knew small voices changed wars. And upon the wind-swept black water, a single fisher's skiff slid away under moonlight, its sail dyed onion gray. A bearded man sat at the tiller, cloak concealing island-born steel at his hip, carrying dispatches from Stannis to cautious allies in the city. Lord Davos Seaworth trusted the sea more than any court, yet even he felt the tide turning strange beneath his keel. Within the Tower of the Hand, King Eddard Stark extinguished the last candle. The chambers fell into darkness, broken only by the faint glow of embers in the hearth. He stood at the window and listened to unseen waves kiss the breakwater far below. He had taken a crown not to climb above men but to shield them, as a father shields his children from winter's breath. And yet winter marched still, wearing cloaks of crimson and green and gold. Ned closed his eyes. Lyanna's face rose to meet him, haloed by blue winter roses. Her mouth shaped words he could not hear, yet he thought they might have been the same he had spoken across Robert's beer. Duty is not love, but love may yet be born of duty. He bowed his head. In the stillness, the crown sat cold upon his brow, and its chill seeped inward until it felt a part of his very skull, forged to bone by oaths deeper than steel. Tomorrow, he would call the council at dawn. Tomorrow, he would draft letters to every holdfast in the kingdoms, summoning harvests for city mouths and swords for city walls. Tomorrow he would face Cersei and her golden brood, Tywin and his gilded host, Stannis and his iron rights, Renly and his bright laughter. But tonight he stood alone beneath the southern sky and felt the first breath of winter in the distant north. He leaned into that breath as though one kiss of cold could remind him who he was and from whence he came. Somewhere beyond the walls, the direwolves of Winterfell howled at a crescent moon, and their song wrapped itself around the new king's heart like a promise older than crowns. The pack survives. A hush had settled over the Red Keep after the long drums of celebration fell silent, the hush of old stone that remembered siege and smoke, and still bore in its every vein the dread when dragons last beat their wings above it. Torches hissed along each stairwell, and every stairwell seemed to lean inward as though listening for the secrets of a fresh-forged reign. Eddard Stark rose before dawn on the 8th day of his kingship, and felt the weight of time gather behind his ribs. He had slept in the same chamber once kept by King Aegon IV, a ruler whose excess stained half the histories Ned's maesters recopied in the vault beneath Winterfell. But the room felt too large, its pillars standing like watchful giants, its ceiling lost in shadow, even when all braziers glowed. A king should not need to holler his words across emptiness just to reach the rushes at his feet. Yet that was how the chamber sounded when he whispered for his squire. An echo returning lonely and faint, as if even walls doubted. He bid Tamard bring plain riding leathers and a wool cloak patterned gray on white with the direwolf. Gold-threaded velvets gathered dust on pegs. The king wore homespun. Dawn's pallor seeped through the arrow slits, paling his face to something carved from the snows of the wolfswood. In the low light his years showed, wreaths of silver in his beard, a fragile blue beneath hard northern gray eyes. He descended alone. Servants bowed like reeds. Some blinked, plainly baffled that a crowned head should move without trumpets or retinues. By the outer ward Ned saddled his own courser, an aging dapple that had carried him since Winterfell. The stable hand stammered an offer to fetch a caparison charger with gilt halter. Ned thanked the boy and swung astride the horse he trusted. The hooves rang on cobble, a lonely music beneath dawn's incomplete song. At the fishmonger's square, the air reeked of brine and night-old entrails. A few lanterns still burned, ghosts in the morning haze. Gulls strutted between overturned baskets pecking at fish scales. Ned dismounted by the low seawall where a single figure stood hunched, cloaked onion gray. Davos Seaworth turned, good-eyed glinting. A coarse beard hid half his grin. "My lord beg pardon, your grace." He bowed deep. "Davos," Ned said. "I asked for truth, never titles." Have you a reply? The smuggler knight straightened, produced a wax-sealed scrap. From Lord Stannis. Sent me upriver under black sail 3 nights past. Hard tide, fast currents, but a smaller craft slips eyes that watch for banners. Nah. Ned cracked the seal. Ink bitten, so deep the strokes scored parchment. Eddard Stark. You name truth. A dawn no man may delay. I name delay a treason that slays truth. Joffrey is falseborn. So your own quills confirm. You wear a crown that should sit on my brow. I shall have it by law or by sword. Yet law first. Call a trial of lineage within 7 days, chaired by the Great Sept and the Citadel's conclave. Let maesters test the boy's seed against Robert's brothers. Fail, and understand I come with fire and fury. Stannis of House Baratheon, true heir. Ned folded the letter, aware of surf crashing in the gloom beyond. He gives me 7 days. Aye, and no mercy after, Davos said. But he is a just man. If you call the conclave, he'll abide its verdict. And if the conclave finds him true, then your grace will have gained justice, though at steep cost. Ned managed a thin smile. You think much like your lord. I scarce think at all beside him. Davos clasped gloved hands. But I know this city, and I know the smell before riots. Tywin's gold fills wine cups tonight. The small folk drink dread quicker than ale. I will convene the Septon, the Archmaesters, and every high lord within reach. He sighed. 7 days. Tell your lord I honor his patience, and mine will match it, not a heartbeat longer. Davos bowed once more, and slipped onto a skiff moored beneath the quay. Oars dipped without splash. Mist closed behind him like curtains. Ned lingered a moment longer, staring where river met bay, where lights from anchored ships blurred in gray. Somewhere in that murk lay the red wine galleys pledged to Renly, the bravo sea carrack hiring sellswords by the dozen, and beyond, unseen but surely present, the Lannister fleet out of Lannisport, 35 warcogs tight with archers and oil. The water looked calm, but churned beneath. He rode back through streets waking slow. Donkey carts rattled, bakeries exhaled warm yeast, and across guttered alleys people already argued whether the Wolf King or the Lion Cub would grant fairer taxes. He smelled simmering clams, horse dung, a hint of lilac from a brothel shutter. In better times he might have smiled at the city's clamor. Now every voice sounded like a knell. In the Tower of the Hand, the small council awaited. They rose when he pushed the doors, but only Varys' expression reached more than polite stiffness. Your Grace, the eunuch said. We wondered at your dawn ride. I needed cold air to clear a heated mind. Ned sat. News. Lord Stannis demands a trial of lineage within 7 days. We must reply. Renly lounged, flicking lint from a sleeve of Tyrell green. Stannis demands. Stannis always demands. Yet has he men to enforce? Now. Enough, Ned said. He has Dragonstoned his ships, Storm's End's garrison, and the law of primogeniture. Littlefinger tapped quill to lip. Law is parchment, power is blood and coin. A conclave may brand Joffrey falseborn, yet what of 10,000 gold cloaks sworn to Cersei's coffers? Then we see to the gold cloaks, Ned answered. They served the city, not pockets. Pycelle coughed himself pink. Ahem. The city requires coin for winter stores. Lord Tywin offered loans at generous terms. One hesitates to offend so munificent a patron. Ned's voice chilled. I will not buy grain with chains. Renly, speak to Mace Tyrell. Request a loan against next harvest. The Reach can spare the seed of charity better than Casterly Rock spares a copper. Renly's grin widened. My lord father will open his purse if the king assures a friendly ear. A marriage, perhaps. Ned knew the angle. Margaery Tyrell's name fluttered in every corridor like a caged lark. Sweet-voiced, unwed, ripe to be queen to whichever man caught her with ring and promise. We'll discuss after the conclave. Varys inclined a smooth head. Forgive my plainness, your grace, but 7 days pass in a sigh. The Archmaesters will need escort from Old Town. The High Septon rehearses prayer cycles for weeks before ceremony. We must send ravens before dusk. Draft them, Ned said. Sir Barristan, you will bear my seal to Old Town. The old knight bowed in silence, but Ned saw a flicker of gratitude in silver brows. Selmy had served an empire of lions and dragons. Perhaps a royal work of mere ravens felt honest for once. The council dispersed under a pall of quills scratching. Caitlin joined him in the solar before midday. She carried needlework rolled tight, but her hands did not touch it once. "You've ridden alone again," she scolded gently. "Kings draw arrows born of rumor. Never give one clean mark. I'm still Ned beneath this crown." He smiled with more weariness than joy. "If I bar every risk, I bar every act." She placed fingers on his wrist. "Then let a wife share the risk." Her eyes searched the lines that grief had sketched across his face. "These lords circle like hounds round a bear. You must name allies before they snatch the meat from your hands." "Man." He thought of Tyrell roses, of Arryn falcons, of Tully trout. Each house sought its own tide. Even the north, gods keep them, would weigh peace against the grain that could feed them past winter. "Robb sends reports daily," Cat went on. "He writes of drills at Moat Cailin, of Karstark spears marching to Winterfell. He says fear sniffs under doors like cold." Ned's heart clenched. He had not wanted Robb to bear that mantle so young. "Tell him. Resist provocation. The North will not unsheathe first." "Nah? You ask a boy to stand still while the world brands him target." Caitlyn's tone softened. "He will obey, yet obedience may cost dear." Ned rose, paced to the window. The city's rooftops glimmered beneath crisp sun, but columns of smoke from campfires beyond the walls blurred the horizon. "What price is peace?" he murmured. "What price truth?" She came beside him and rested head to his shoulder. "Yours, perhaps, but yours alone is not the realm's. Share the burden." Her voice dropped to nearly nothing. "Share it with me." He kissed her brow, drawing strength from her steadiness. "I will." The simple vow felt larger than wedding oaths. That evening he hosted Renly and Lady Margaery beneath paper lanterns, strung in the Maiden Vault garden. Perfumed night-blooming flowers hung heavy. Fountains trickled like silver threads. Margaery's smile could have coaxed fruit from ash. She spoke of her grandmother's orchard, of tournaments she hoped to see revived, of singers starved without royal patronage. All gentle seeds of a Reach Queen sowing charm. Renly pressed wine upon Ned. "The girl adores children. Hunts with a light bow. Keeps a kennel of hounds named after the seven. Imagine the city's joy in such a mistress. Marry her, and every breadbasket from Highgarden to Bitterbridge will heap grain upon your benches." Ned set the cup aside untouched. "Mine is a northern crown. I will not put away a wife who has borne me 5 children and shared each hardship." Margaery curtsied, eyes lowering but not dimming. "Your Grace's loyalty honors all wives. Forgive any presumption. Should you ever wish a foster daughter at court, think on me." Her glance at Sansa, seated near the fountain, was warm and conspiratorial. Sansa blushed, beguiled at once. Renly did not push further that night, yet Ned tasted calculation beneath every nod of good humor. On the second day, the Archmaester of Mathematics and Measures arrived by swift galley, only one man of the conclave, but symbol enough to hush skeptics. On the third, wagons bearing crates of ink-stained ledgers rolled through Lion Gate under Arryn banners. Evidence collected by Jon Arryn before his death, now entrusted by Lady Lysa to Jon Royce's iron care. The crates were sealed with ribbon bearing the falcon and moon. Ned had guards watch the wagons like newborn princes. But Tywin Lannister's host had not been idle. Red tents sprouted along the Gold Road as mushrooms after rain. Scouts whispered of trebuchets assembled from riverbank timber, of smithies churning spearheads night and day. Ned's riders counted 20,000 foot and near 8,000 horse, all draped crimson and drowning the outlands in bright threat. Ned summoned Janos Slynt, commander of the city watch. In the throne room, the man strode in boasting gilt gorget, paunch swelling beneath scale. He knelt, but not too low. "Lord, your grace," Janos said, licking lips. "You requested the gold cloaks swear fresh oaths? I require only that they swear the old ones." Ned studied the man's small watery eyes. To defend the peace of King's Landing, and to obey the lawful king. Just so, Slynt said. And yet, gold cloaks must eat. Their purses grow thin. Performance of duty links closely to pay. You have your wages on time? A sly grin. Yet, there are bonuses sometimes furnished by gracious benefactors who appreciate swift justice. Benefactors, Ned repeated. Such as Lord Baelish? Slynt coughed. His lordship has been generous at times, as have others. Generosity breeds expectations, Ned warned. Should Tywin Lannister attempt purchase of allegiance, remember your pledge, or I will replace your cloak with hemp rope. Slynt's grin fled. Loyal, your grace. On my honor. Yet, as he withdrew, Ned saw in the man's back a stiff resentfulness that did not bode soft. He met with Littlefinger that noon. Petyr wore purple silk, the mockingbird pin winking. You threatened Janos. Brave, but perhaps heavy-handed. Would you rather the watch turn sellsword? Petyr spread palms. Weapons of policy, dear Ned. Better to own them than scold them. Is that how you keep the Vale's coin? Ned asked. Littlefinger's smile sharpened. I keep the Vale's secrets. Coin follows of its own accord. He leaned closer. These crates from the Eyrie, what know you of their contents? Proof, Ned said. Enough to damn Cersei. Damning a queen damns half the council that served her husband. A shrug. Careful you do not drown the kingdom in righteousness. Ned turned away. I will drown us only if the shore proves false ground. At dusk of the 5th day, ravens blackened the air over the Red Keep. Messages of alarm. Lannister outriders clashed with Tyrell bannermen near Bitterbridge. A detachment of Stannis loyal Stormlanders seized a grain town up the Rosewad. Pirates under black sails preyed on Myrish traders, bound for King's Landing. War's edge crept closer, its shape still blurred but unmistakable. Ned convened his marshals in the dim vaults beneath the castle. A map of the Crownlands lay unrolled on oak planks, pins of colored jade marking friend and foe. Lord Mace Tyrell spoke loudest, voice thick as cream. Let me ride at once. 20,000 reach spears will scatter these lions to their hills. Tywin seeks that battle, Ned replied. He hungers for cause to storm the gates. Hold your men south of the Blackwater until I give word. Tyrell's florid face reddened. Am I to watch crops burn while waiting on ravens? Reach knights rot in camp, idle blades itching. Idle they must remain, Ned said. We wield patience as swordplay. Stannis' envoy pounded fist to table. And what of law? 2 days to your conclave. Yet every hour the queen's spawn strut in velvet. The envoy's chain of office rattled. Our lord grows. I know how Lord Stannis grows. Ned cut in sharp dignity. He shall have lawful judgment or my life conceded. The envoy sketched curt bow, but his eyes burned. After the councillors filed out, Ser Barristan remained. Candlelight rippled across the mirror sheen of his helm. Your Grace, I beg a private word. Ned nodded, sending pages scurrying. Barristan eased shoulders, set helmet aside. I have served half a century. In that span, I have seen kings win loyalty by love, by terror, by prophecy, by coin. Never by plain truth. Truth alone stands unarmed. Then we give it armor, Ned said. Armor cracks. Swords shatter. Will you arm truth even against your sons? Shock flickered through Ned. What do you mean? Barristan lifted parchment of his own. Sigil, Dire Wolf. Wax fresh. Intercepted by my men to ensure no foul tampering. From Prince Governor Robb Stark. He begs leave to march south with the northern host. For word spreads that Lannisters hoard spears to seize Winterfell, should your crown falter. Ned read the hurried script. Robb pleading to fight, Theon boasting of the old way. Maester Luwin's steady advisings appended. A father's heart clenched. He is but a boy groomed among wolves, Selmy said. Boys know teeth as well as men. What counsel, Ser Barristan? The knight hesitated, age furrowing deeper. Send for him. Bring the young wolf beneath your wing before others bend him elsewhere. Ned exhaled. I would keep him north, but perhaps winter migrates faster than ravens now. That night, he wrote a long letter, sealed thrice, instructing Robb to ride with only 100 picked men, leaving the host in Great John Umber's command. The way south grew perilous. Smaller groups traveled faster and drew less spear point. He slept little. Dreams twisted. Lyanna running through Godswood mists, her laughter turning to direwolf howl, a crown of snow melting red upon her brow. On the 6th day, Queen Cersei struck her opening blow. The king sat in audience hall, listening to petitions of smallhold farmers, when doors boomed. Ser Boros Blount strode ahead of Joffrey and Tommen, each flanked by 7 gold cloaks whose sashes gleamed newly sewn with golden lions. Behind came the queen, white gown replaced by metal rigid brocade the hue of molten sun. Cersei knelt not, but raised a paper scroll. Your Grace, I present the demand of my son, the rightful King Joffrey of houses Baratheon and Lannister. Ned's jaw tightened. Speak it. Release of all crates of seditious false evidence given by the Eyrie, she said. Return of my brother Tyrion, held by tribesmen of the Vale under secret order. Immediate dissolution of the pending conclave, which slanders his essential birth. Clamor burst among nobles lining the hall. Swords half-drawn, whispers slicing. Ned stood, Iron Throne looming vacant 10 paces behind. No prisoner have I ordered. If Tyrion is captive, the Vale must answer. As for the crates, they are proof, not sedition, and the conclave convenes tomorrow by law. Cersei's eyes blazed. Then understand the cost. She snapped fingers. Gold cloaks thrust forward a burlap sack. A dull shape tumbled out. The severed hand of a Northman, nails caked black. Gasps Daeon Owen. Your Ranger Jory Castle, taken while stalking Lannister lions. Cersei said. Next will be his head if you pursue this farce. Grief punched Ned's gut. Rage followed hot. But he kept voice iron flat. Murder does not halt justice. It proves need of it. Cersei's smile was winter glass. Justice? I learned justice the night my friend Aelia screamed beneath your friend Robert's sword. You preach honesty, yet my son's life weighs on a parchment penned by a dead old man and rumors traced in seed. Her words whipped echoes from columns. Push further, and I will ignite every grain silo from here to Duskendale. Let us see how your honest small folk fare on ashes. Guards shifted. Tension strung the hall like arrow-knocked bow. Ned stepped down the dais stairs until faces nearly touched. Quietly he said, You threaten the realm to save a lie, and yet you call that justice. Think on your father's words. A lion does not concern itself with the opinion of sheep, but wolves hunt in packs. Remember that. Name Nahawe. Cersei's gaze glittered, then she turned, cloak swirling. Gold cloaks herded the princelings away. The severed hand lay upon marble like a pale question none dared answer. That eve Ned knelt alone before the weirwood transplanted generations ago to the Red Keep's modest Godswood. Its face was young compared to Winterfell's heart tree, but crimson sap still bled from eyes carved by men who remembered the cold of truly old nights. Pale moonlight filtered through leaf and bone-white branch, dappling his gray tunic. He prayed, not for victory, but for clarity. Snow balanced lightly on a branch overhead, though none had fallen in the city. Perhaps blossom petals, yet they looked like snow to him. He asked the old gods to guide Robb's ride south, to soothe Sansa's trembling heart, to keep Arya's quick temper from reckless fences. He asked mercy for Jory's soul. He begged enough wisdom to spare children price of parents' sins. When at last he rose, sap wet his knee where he had knelt. It looked like blood in starlight. Morning of the 7th day, bells rang, not for death nor for feast, but to summon all lords to the great sept of Baelor. The city thronged. Rumor raced ahead. Trial of the bastard king counting seeds. Some called it miracle, some heresy. Inside, sunlight slanted through colored crystal onto ranks of pews where high-born and low-packed shoulder to shoulder. Archmaesters in gray conclave robes stood beside septons chanting low. The smell of beeswax, parchment dust, and anxious sweat mingled. Eddard Stark entered flanked, not by armored guard, but by Sir Barristan Selmy and Lord Jon Royce. Catelyn and Sansa followed behind, veiled. Across the nave Cersei and her children sat beneath a canopy of cloth of gold. Jaime Lannister, wearing Kingsguard white, lounged at her heel, gaze sweeping. High Septon Theomar VII, a stooped man wreathed in rainbow crystal, gave blessing. Then Archmaester Valen of Genetics, rare study at the Citadel, but real, stepped forward with scrolls. We have tested exhumed bones of Lord Steffon Baratheon, matched marrow remnants to nail parings of his grandsons. A collective breath held. We compared to King Robert's known bastards recovered discreetly in the city. Another ripple. The markers of black hair, blue eye, square jaw. These we traced. Prince Tommen shares none. Nor does Princess Myrcella. Nor... He paused, eyes sweeping the hall. Prince Joffrey. Whispers exploded into thunder. Cersei rose, face white. Jaime's hand dropped to sword. Valen raised his voice. By science of blood, and by sight of the Seven, we pronounce these children fathered, not by Robert of the House Baratheon, but by one sharing greater kinship to the Queen herself. Jaime's sword hissed halfway free. Sir Barristan mirrored. Gold cloaks inside stepped from walls. Small folk shrieked. Ned lifted hands. The conclave has spoken. Joffrey, Tommen, and Myrcella are hereby disinherited. The crown reverts to next senior Baratheon, Lord Stannis. He said it. He let the echo travel like a stone skimming water, rippling, rippling. Then he added, voice steady. Until Lord Stannis arrives, I will continue as Lord Protector, divesting crown to him the moment he enters this hall. Gasps softened to uneasy murmur. Some seemed relieved. Civil order preserved. Bloodshed perhaps staved. But Cersei's laugh cut above. Until Stannis arrives, he will sail into bay rimmed with Lannister steel. You think this parchment shield? She tore a scroll from Velen, crumpled. I have armies. And so will the realm, Ned said. Jaime shouted over the din. All those loyal to the true queen, defend her. Steel rasped. Gold cloaks shifted uncertain. A heartbeat of suspended terror. Then Janos Slynt barked. Hold. He marched to aisle, eyes flicking between possible paymasters. Gloved hand raised. Stand down. By order of the king. His voice carried. But which king? Cersei's glare promised bags of gold. Ned's promised rope. Slynt wavered. Littlefinger, somewhere behind pillars, smiled. A brawny Tyrell knight shoved past pews, sword raised against a Lannister. Sparks flew. That crack detonated the hall. Battle erupted. Steel clanging under rainbow glass. Screams shredding prayer song. Barristan sheltered Sansa behind a pillar. Ned drew ice, the great blade whistling arcs of raw winter. He parried a gold cloak spear, smashed pommel into helm, glanced at where Cersei hustled children toward side exit. Jaime slashed through two reachmen. Golden hair whip-coiled, eyes bright with something like joy. Kingslayer, Ned roared. They met at nave's center beneath exploding crystal shards. Jaime's longsword crashed against ice. Sparks like red snow. Lannister guards closed, but Royce's bronze slammed them aside. Meanwhile, Pycelle cowered behind altar. Varys vanished entirely. Amid storm of blades, a horn sounded outside. Long, booming. Stannis ships in the bay? No, others. Suddenly the heavy western doors burst inward. Smoke rolling, men shouting, "The North remembers!" A wedge of northern spearmen poured in, cloaks frosted with travel dust. Sigils of Umber Bear and Karstark's son. At their head strode Robb Stark, face lean, eyes hardened far beyond 17. "Father," he cried. Ned's heart lurched. Jaime twisted to parry the new threat. Ned took the opening. Ice hammered down, sparked from Jaime's raised guard, split armored pauldron. Blood sprayed, bright as firework. Jaime staggered, but a gold cloak yanked him back. They retreated toward Queen. Robb's men formed shield wall about Lords. With sudden surge, the hall shifted. Lannister's strength wavered, seeing fresh hosts. Cersei reached the side arch, shoved her children through. Ser Boros slammed gate behind, sealing. Barricades scraped. Robb knelt before his father even as clash rang behind. Moat Cailin fell quiet. I rode hard. Ned pulled him up. Relief and fear mingled. You arrive at the hour of wolves. They fought shoulder to shoulder until bells tolled alarm across city. Half the gold cloaks turned cloaks indeed, some hacking at Lannister, some at Stark, confusion wild. Littlefinger slipped through with muttered apologies, knives hidden. Within quarter hour the battle broke. Lannisters withdrew, carrying wounded Jaime. Cersei vanished behind layers of red steel, out a postern to the keep proper. The septy floor looked a carpenter's ruin, splintered pews, shattered glass, sprawled bodies in rainbow blood. Ned surveyed carnage, chest heaving. High Septon, emerging from refuge, wept at defilement of sacred ground, yet blessed the northern prince between sobs. News flew faster than arrows. Lion host outside city moved, Renly's banners mobilized, Stannis' fleet sighted off Storm's End. King's Landing had drawn first blood of civil war. Ned convened emergency council in Tower of Hand. Robb attended, flanked by Great John and Mage Mormont, found at Riverlands Crossing. Catelyn clasped Robb's arm, tears of pride and horror mixing. Sansa hovered pale but resolved. Arya nowhere to be found. Last seen brandishing wooden practice sword chasing a stable hand who called her boy. Cersei will claim massacre, Renly said, binding a cut on his elbow. We must strike before Tywin cages us. Strike where? Great John boomed. Give me hot steel and I'll crack their lines afore breakfast. Lines 10 leagues deep, Royce countered. We need numbers. Stannis' envoy coughed. You need rightful banner. Lord Stannis is 2 days by sail. Meet him with open gates. Renly snorted. So he may parade through claiming prize while we bled. Never. Nirna. Argument rose like hornet cloud. Ned pounded table with pommel of ice, silence falling. We faced 3 storms, Tywin west, Renly south within, Stannis east at sea. Only unity stands between city and ruin. He met each gaze. I relinquish crown this hour. Gasps. ... Catelyn's hand flew to mouth. Robb's brow knotted. Ned continued. I was caretaker. Stannis is heir by law. We will proclaim him tomorrow on the steps of the Sept. Madness, Renly said. The city will riot. Then we feed it hope, Ned replied. Stannis wed to Renly's ward Margaery. Tyrell grain secures populace. Mace Tyrell's eyes widened. You yield? To Stannis? He glanced at daughter. She inclined head, composed. And yours truly, Ned added, turning to Robb. We'll escort north to rally wintermen. The Wolf King's hour ends. The realm needs unity more. But Selmy shook head. Too late. You shed blood of Lannister, their pride wounds mortal. Tywin will not treat with Starks or Baratheons. He will burn first. Ned looked at the wrinkled knight. Then we outride the fire. Tomorrow I kneel. Tonight we send ravens to Tywin offering safe withdrawal for his host. Judgment by great council under the Seven. We offer him seat beside us, not beneath. Damsat. Littlefinger reappeared from shadow. Offer him gold, and he'll listen dearer. The crown owes 2 million dragons. Then I repay from Stark coffers, Ned said. Petter's eyebrows danced. Generous. Foolish, perhaps, but generous. Plans laid. Ravens penned. Men dispersed to walls. In narrow corridor Robb halted father. You abdicate. What of us? You will be Warden of the North sooner than I ever hoped, Ned said. Wear that title with honor. And you? I go home when war ends. Robb's voice broke. Will it? Ned pulled him close. Nothing ends, Robb. We carry winter inside us. When storms pass, we tend fallen and plant anew. They parted at Stair Landing. Ned climbed alone to royal balcony, overlooking Blackwater. The bay was moonlit steel. Lanterns winked from masts. A forest of points. Soon Stannis' banners would join, or threaten. He felt exhaustion beyond bone. Yet beneath it pulsed a fierce calm. He had chosen. He would yield a crown to save a realm, even if realm refused to be saved. Footsteps. Varys emerged as though spun from night air. "A bold course, my lord." "Call me lord, not king," Ned said. "As you wish. I applaud self-sacrifice. Yet one wonders, when you kneel, will any kneel with you?" "They will, if they love the realm." Varys' eyes were black lakes. Love is a song men remember only while music plays. Fear is the drum that beats without pause. Cersei beats that drum. He paused. "I hear distant horns now, north and south together. Rebellion has many faces." Ned turned away. "I know. Then know this. A spider's web holds only so long as spider lives. If I fall, secrets tangle." With that cryptic warning, he melted back into dark. Midnight tolled. Ned walked the ramparts once more. Robb's northern guard patrolled, torches in steady rhythm. Downriver, a flotilla of supply barges burned. Sabotage unknown attacker. Orange reflection rippled under walls. He closed eyes. Lyanna's voice again. "Promise me." Might she ask him now to promise the same to realm? He would, even if promises cost blood more precious than his own. A cold wind slid from the east. He breathed deep the salt, the smoke, the promise wrapped in coming dawn. Somewhere wolves howled, perhaps only memory. He answered beneath breath, voice nearly a growl. "The pack survives." And far below, in the forge cellars, a coppersmith hammered sigils onto new coin dies. Direwolf on one side, crowned stag on the other, proof that two houses could share a realm, or sign that none could. The hammer rose and fell, sparks flying like captive stars, while above, a king set crown aside and awaited daylight to kneel. The black hours before dawn drifted like smothering velvet across King's Landing, swallowing the torches one by one until only the high beacon on the Tower of the Hand glimmered, a lone star resisting the night. A lone star resisting the night. Winds from the bay prowled through deserted lanes. They carried the brine of broken surf and the iron tang of char that still clung to charred barges, drifting stern up against the pylons of the river piers. Eddard Stark had not slept. In the silent chamber that yesterday had held a crown upon his brow, now only the hush of a banked hearth remained to mock pretense. Catelyn had retired at his urging, though she had done so with reluctant steps and eyes that shimmered candle-bright with unshed worry. The king, or the steward of an hour, as he chose to think of himself, paced a measured path from shuttered window to table, back again, while ravens hammered their wings against the storm boards outside. Each bird bore a letter of entreaty, threat, or plea. Tywin's curt demand for satisfaction. Stannis' cold reminder of the morrow's proclamation. Renly's invitation to a midnight council of sound men who understood necessity. Even a wax-stained scrap from the Shadow Tower far in the north. Maester Aemon's aged hand lamenting rumor of the realm's rift, and begging Eddard to remember the true war beyond the wall. He had read them all until words blurred to the same dull hue of impasse. Ice lay unsheathed across the table, steel veined with ripples caught from the hearth's last glow. Over and again Ned's fingers traced the fuller, feeling the never-warm metal as if it might whisper counsel. It did not. The sword could only cut, and he had vowed that before it cut again he would place its judgment in lawful hands. Dawn must see truth rise, not the wolf's blade. A timid knock alit upon the door, just when the noise of bells seemed a memory from a different city. Tomard entered, face still baby round despite the stubble. "Ser Barristan begs your leave. Your lord? He waits below with the river escort. Sun near its rim. Denny." "Send him in, but quietly," Ned said, never breaking stride. Selmy stepped through moments later, ghost pale in the dim. He bowed, more deeply than he had done the day they crowned Ned. "My lord." Pikes light the shore. The watchers at Rivermouth whistle sighting sails, likely Lord Stannis' vanguard. Also riders from the Gold Road, they carry Lannister colors, but fly a white pennon quartered black. Parley, they claim. Parley, Ned echoed, tasting the word. Tywin would bargain with one hand while the other strangles. He tugged his cloak straight. We receive them. On the eastern spur at sunrise. Assemble a guard of 50, no more. Swords sheathed, shields plain. Their host will interpret every flourish. Nan de Saurims. Selmy inclined his snow-white head. And the matter of your crown. The small folk look for ceremony before the midday heat climbs. The High Septon polishes his Septon's crown of crystal. He expects to anoint Lord Stannis in full sight. He paused, voice softening. But they name you king still in alley, and keep alight. Kings are made by swords, Ned said, but peace is forged by their rest. He reached for parchment he had inked before dawn, sealed with a wolf's head, stamped in plain lead, not gold. My abdication in writing. The Septon will read it when he crowns the rightful heir. Selmy accepted the scroll as one receives a newborn. An age will sing of this if songs survive the fire. His eyes shimmered with something between sorrow and pride. Songs do little for widows, Ned answered, then pressed a hand to the old knight's steel-coated arm. Walk with me, sir. Before dawn, I must breathe a freer air. They departed by a winding stair seldom frequented, descending into cloisters where moonlight from high slits painted ghost stripes on stone. No footfalls answered theirs. No servant stirred. Only at the third landing did Ned glimpse movement. A sparrow of a girl, hair a tangle of night, perched upon the lip of an embrasure. Arya. She swung her legs above a drop that would dash her on flags below. But her eyes, huge and bright, held no fear. Back to bed, Ned whispered, drawing close. You should not flit like bats through keeps at such an hour. I heard steel, she whispered, and indeed from far courtyard depths came the faint chime of practice blades. I want to watch the dawn. They say dragons never come at sunrise because the light blinds them. But lions, they prowl any hour. A wise mind for so young. He brushed a braid from her cheek, a braid too uneven by half. No Septa's hand had woven it. Your father must soon meet those lions at a table. Promise me you will watch from safe places, not ledges. Her mouth twisted, half smile, half grief. I promise the ledges. Safe places. She shook her head as if at a jest only she understood. Be the wolf, father. He kissed her brow and left her lit by moon silver, a wisp of winter in a city too thick with heat. They strode beneath archways where the first gray seeped into sky. On the Sparrowhawk stair sudden hush fell, the hush of men holding breath. Ahead, in the gloom, 3 shapes detached from pillars. Hooded, swift. Daggers flashed. Ser Barristan moved quicker than dawn. His blade slipped from scabbard, all but unseen. 2 knives rang harmless from its length. One clattered to stone, the other spun away into dark. The third assailant lunged past the white knight, straight for Ned. He glimpsed a scarlet rag knotted round the man's wrist, street sign of some flea-bottom gang. There was no time to draw ice. Ned pivoted, caught the attacker's forearm against elbow, twisted. Bone cracked, knife fell. Barristan's pommel struck the assailant's temple, ending it. Gold buys many blades. Selmy murmured, toe nudging the rag. Yet these wear no lion. The queen sows riot, Ned said, pulse steady now. Best warn the watch. He hated the taste of the word. But Janos Slynt still commanded half the men between keep and gate. Barristan agreed. They reached the eastern spur, as sun's rim burst blood-red above bay. 50 of Ned's loyal Northmen formed a lane along the quay. Karstark sunbursts, Mormont bears, Glover's silver fist. But they wore plain leather over sigil, as ordered. A hush breathed among them when the masts of the envoy's barge slid into view. Red sails striped white. On the yard 2 banners drooped. 1 lion, 1 pale band of truce quartered black. No horns. The barge kissed pier. Down its gangplank filed 6 Lannister men-at-arms, gilded but bareheaded, helms carried under arms. Between them walked Kevan Lannister, older than rumor, broad. Beside him, a figure slender in maester's gray, no links though. a healer or lensman pressed to diplomatic duty. And at their rear, unexpected, plodded Sandor Clegane, helm carried like a severed head, burned face working as if against taste of bile. Ned greeted with crisp nod. Lord Kevan. Lord Stark. Kevan's bow lacked nothing. Ser Barristan, an honor, as always. He left unsaid that the Kingsguard should have been guarding a boy-king hidden in some chamber of the Red Keep. The omission hovered. Ned led them to a low stone table above waterline. No banners, only rough planks. Salt wind muttered in rigging overhead. Kevan began without flourish. House Lannister shall recognize Lord Stannis Baratheon's succession provided 3 conditions. First, that the safety and dignity of Queen Cersei and her children be guaranteed, with leave to depart for Casterly Rock unmolested, and to reside there, under royal pardon. He slid a parchment. Second, that no levy or fine be placed upon House Lannister for acts preceding this dawn. Selmy grunted. Ned raised palm and Kevan pressed on. Third, that Lord Tywin retain his post as Warden of the West, and that his host, presently encamped, be deemed a royal levy, so that no dishonor attaches. Ned read each line. Reasonable terms, he admitted. Yet incomplete. The Queen's children must be submitted to the faith for gentle confinement until their maturity, there to live in dignity but under Septon's ward. Hostage, growled Sandor. Custody, Ned returned. The realm must know no lion abroad in wolf's disguise. Once grown, they may choose cloister or marriage, but they relinquish all claim. He slid the parchment back, with additions scratched at margin. Kevan studied the script, jaw tightening. My brother may bend, my niece never. She would sooner set the rock afire with wildfire. Wildfire will burn her children also, Selmy said. A silence. Clegane spat into water. Dragonfire took my face, and wildfire drunk hotter. The Queen plays with potions she cannot swallow. Ned watched the man, wondering what rifts ran in that scarred mind. Sandor Clegane, if you fear for small folk beneath wildfire, help me end this without flame. Sandor met his stare. Small folk are dogs, yelping until kicked, but dogs my brother likes to roast. I'll help for spite. A grin as ragged as his scar. Kevan exhaled, heavy. Let me bear counter-proposal to my brother. At sunset you will have answer. By sunset, Ned agreed. They grasped wrists, formal. The envoy departed. Orange sun climbed. In the great septi the High Septon rehearsed prayer for coronation that might or might not come. His attendants circled with censers, aromatic smoke curling into vaulted shadows. Outside, the square filled with watchers. Some held Stannis' fiery heart banners, but only a few. More brandished crudely inked direwolves, some lion banners, some blank cloth. The city itself wavered, a tapestry half torn by rumor. Jan Royce marched crates of John Arryn's proofs into the Sept crypt. Maesters from Oldtown, Valen among them. Unsealed fresh wax. Wrote copies, prepared sealed prisms for archives. Each sheet, each bone sample, each sworn testimony weighed upon them like blocks of stone. Mid-morning new rumor burst, a grain riot in Cobbler's Square. 2 gold cloaks slain by starving throng. Silos torched. Janos Slynt arrived, anxious, begging release of 400 sacks from Tyroshi traders holdfast. Ned granted, ordering immediate distribution at discount. Baelish frowned, coin evaporated, but obeyed. Pettier followed Ned into North Walk. You spent coffers of wolves on crowds that may yet feast on your own hand. There are easier ways. Release Joffrey, let him kneel, but keep him as figure. Lannisters pay every barrel, and the realm bleeds, lies forever. Ned shook his head. I will not. Littlefinger's smile wilted to something thin. Then sharpen your axe, Lord Stark. Soon you'll have to swing. Noon baked shingles crimson. Air shimmered. Atop Aegon's Hill, Marguerite Tyrell courted the sun upon a balcony of the Maiden Vault. She wore green silk, hair braided with gold wire. Sansa Stark stood with her, both studying the avenue below where Tyrell riders formed wedge before the Sept. Bright lances upright. They wait for your uncle, Sansa said, voice dream-worn. Or his brother, Margaery replied. Lords barter crowns like apple pies, my lady. But when pies cool, no one recalls who baked them, only who ate the slice. She squeezed Sansa's fingers. Remember that when you see men kneel tomorrow. Sansa's blue eyes fixed on Tyrell petals drifting from balconies onto crowd. Tomorrow, she whispered, as if the word might shatter. Arya Stark watched, unseen, from rafters above the nave where lanterns glowed dull. She had wormed through forgotten crawlspace known only to cats and spiders. The last night's conversation with her father burrowed deep. Be the wolf, he told her. Well, a wolf smelled its prey, and her nose told her something foul crept beneath the sept's pious arches. Below, 2 novices hauled jugs of oil to a side chapel, their shoulders hunched with effort unnatural for supposed acolytes. When a jug's cork toppled, the spill was no lamp oil. It smoked greenish, hissed on marble. Wildfire. Arya's pulse hammered. She crawled back, retracing until she tumbled into sunlit alley behind a potter's shop, and sprinted, bare feet slapping dust, for the Tower of the Hand. Guards blocked entry, but a small scrawl from Vayan Pool still held power. She flashed it and burst into council chamber mid-session. Lords gaped. Littlefinger coughed a laugh. Robb startled, half-drawn. They're filling the sept with wildfire. Arya shouted. I saw it. Jugs bigger than I am. Dressed as novices. For a heartbeat the table sat frozen. Then Barristan stood. How sure, child? Sure as snow is cold. Arya's breath heaved. Ned believed her without blink. Ser Barristan, yawn. Robb, gather men you trust completely. Seal the sept in water. No one enters or exits, save lords we call. Selmy, alert the Guild of Alchemists. If wildfire is misused, their guild will hang beside the one who lit it. Mehtin. They scattered. Littlefinger lingered, tapping thumb to mouth. If the Queen dares burn Baelor's sept with half the highborn inside, the realm will follow you to any abyss. Perhaps you should thank her. Ned glared. I would not barter lives for legitimacy. Petyr shrugged, strolled out. He knelt before Arya. You did well, Cat of the Shadows. He kissed her brow again, but there was iron in his eyes. Now go find your sister. Stay with her until I send. Nainishwar. Afternoon crawled, stifling, pregnant with rumor. Clegane returned bearing sealed message. Tywin agreed to terms on children's confinement, so long as custody remained with neutral faith captains on holy ground, not Stark. Kevan advised he would put question to Queen Cersei at once. Ned sighed. Cersei would never accept, but wedge between Lion Lord and Lioness might serve. Yet wildfire overshadowed everything. By secret sally, Barristan and 30 picked knights entered the sept via crypt, intercepting 4 false novices with second card. 2 died resisting. 1, under threat of burning in her own substance, confessed to a master pyromancer hidden under assumed name Jason Byre, working at Queen's behest. The pyromancer fled, but logs seized revealed double handfuls of caches placed beneath nave columns. Sweating alchemists neutralized casks, dousing fuses, while guards evacuated square disguised as midday chant. Ned penned new charges of high treason to stand beside incest. If the city did not rise behind him now, it never would. Sun dipped westering when horns on the city wall announced a column approaching from the Roseroud. Dust plume gilded red. Great John Umber strode to rampart, squinted. He roared down. Riders bearing antler and flaming heart. Storms and men. Stannis Baratheon himself rode at head. Surcoat black on red, the fiery heart of Erlor stitched where crowned stag once slept. Beside him loped a tall woman in scarlet robes, hair copper as dying coals. Melisandre of Ashai, whispered priestess. Behind, disciplined spear host, banners snapping. At Mudgate Ned rode out with cadre to welcome. The 2 lords met amid churned dust. Stannis dismounted not. I come to claim what law decrees mine, he said. And I to place it in your hands, Ned answered, handing over the scroll of abdication. Stannis broke seal, read quickly. A curt nod. Well done. But law not yet satisfied. This evening we stand in sept, you kneel as witness. Tomorrow I ride against my brother's host. Not if peace holds, Ned said, telling of Kevin's treaty. Stannis' mouth thinned. Cersei will shred parchment. The Red Woman leaned to whisper something like smoke into his ear. He ignored her, turned back. If Tywin's host withdraws, so be it. Yet crown rests on brow before dawn. Ned assented. They clasped wrists. Stannis gripped cold, bones like iron. But at dusk riders pounded in. Lannister, answer. Tywin accepted children's confinement, yet insisted they winter at Casterly Rock under Faith's guard, not within King's Landing where wolves might gnaw. Furthermore, his host would hold ground until highways proved safe. And a final line, the Queen refused any term that touched a single hair of her children's heads. If pressed, she would enthrone Joffrey in exile at the Rock, under blessing of 500 banners. Renly laughed when Scroll read. She bargains from a city she no longer holds. Empty threat. Stannis' lips twisted. No threat is empty while she holds wildfire stores yet undiscovered. He eyed Ned. And while the Reach, loyalty wavers. Renly flushed. Highgarden stands with me, and with the realm. Mace puffed assent, though less certainty lingered in his ruddy cheeks. Night bled across roofs while they argued, whether to accept partial terms, whether to march on the Rock, whether to send the Queen's children west under heavy guard and trust Septons to keep them. In the end, no accord. Stannis demanded unconditional custody. Renly urged leniency that Tyrell grain not wither. Ned, caught, pressed compromise. Deliver Myrcella to the Faith at Old Town for fostering, Tommen to Dragonstone under Maester's ward, Joffrey to take the Black, safe beyond all claims. Stannis found merit, surprisingly. He respected the Wall's absolution. Yet, Tywin, watchers warned, would never yield Joffrey to Black Crows. Decision deferred. Meanwhile, coronation loomed. Torches littered approach to the septate when moon climbed to zenith. Their flames quivered in wind off bay. Yet the great doors stood open and within, candles thronged like an army of stars. The air smelled of fresh scrubbed stone, of incense potent enough to hide wildfire's ghost stench. Alchemists in green robes knelt among pews, heads bowed, each aware that one spark now would cost heads. Ned entered first, flanked by Selmy and Robb. Crowd kept hush. They sensed history's hinge. Stannis followed, bronze crown of Shipbreaker Bay clutched in one mailed fist, Red Woman at heel. Maesters gathered around the marble heart of Baelor's giant statue. High Septon raised arms, crystals blazing. He began long invocation, weaving 7 and 1 god of light in awkward tapestry to satisfy all ears. Sweat beaded his temples. At his cue, Ned stepped forward, unfurled parchment. Selmy read aloud. Eddard Stark, by will of late King Robert, abdicates throne, affirms rightful succession of Lord Stannis Baratheon. Relief rippled. Stannis knelt. Stiffly, for Stannis was not one for bending. And the Septon lowered oil upon brow, set simple circlet. Behold Stannis of House Baratheon, first of his name. The crowd exhaled as if releasing their own chains. Trumpets outside blared, but in that blare pitched a different note. Alarm. Doorward, a squire stumbled in, face white. Fire in the granaries. Farrier's quarter ablaze. Gold cloaks fight but flames run. Ned's stomach clenched. Wildfire diversion. He looked at Stannis. The new king's jaw tightened. To horse. Chaos resumed. Lords spilled into square as bells yelped. Over rooftops, orange columns rose, licking clouds. Wind carried ember flakes like red snow down Maiden's Way. Shouts of bucket lines mingled with screams of trapped smallfolk. Robb raced beside Ned through streets choked in smoke. At juncture of Cobbler's Way, they found Janos, Slint, directing lines. He sweated, jacket singed. They set fire under grain storehouses, hundreds, small folk trapped inside seeking bread. Ned dismounted, waded into smoke, dragging half-conscious girl, robe aflame. Robb, Grayson, Mormont formed wedge, pulling sacks of grain to safety, stamping sparks. Hours passed, time lost to roar, cracking beams, stink of scorched wool. When dawn painted sky gray rose, the farrier's quarter still smoked, but core flames starved. Casualties numbered hundreds, grain stores halved. Circe's vengeance burned the bread he meant for winter. Yet a miracle, hardly any wildfire had seeped into flames. Alchemists' fear of retribution perhaps curbed sabotage. Still, ruin enough to chill hope. In council chamber at dawn, soot-streaked, Ned faced lords bleary and ash-flecked. No more negotiation, Stannis pronounced. Gaunt cheeks, pinched. Tywin delays to starve city. We ride before noon. Dire needs require dire acts. Renly objected. Hold city. Secure feed from reach wagons. Stannis scoffed. Wagons burned before they reached gates. Robb offered to ride west with northern outriders, harass Lannister flanks, buy time. Ned weighed, his son fresh in war's ways, yet the Northmen champed for battle, and Greatjon stood ready. Decision carved itself. Ned appointed Robb Lord Marshal of the host in the field. 2,000 North spears, 1,000 river horse, 500 reach crossbows under Lord Rowan. Their task: screen approaches, break Lannister forage lines, avoid pitched battle. Meanwhile, Stannis prepared main host. Stormlanders, city militia, Sell-Sail archers, plus a contingent of Tyrell heavy cavalry under Garland offered grudgingly by Mace to please Renly. Selmy took command of Royal Guard. Ned? He would remain within walls, governing city and faith. But when Tywin withdrew or broke, he vowed to ride north and see Robb safe. Catelyn accepted with stoic grace. Tears she saved for later, alone with silent godswood. Robb parted at King's Gate under rain that smelled of smoke and salt. Arya rode at his stirrup on Nymeria. No, a half-wild mare she insisted naming thus. Ned forbade, but she slipped out anyway. He spurred Grey Wind, the direwolf pup, now lanky adolescent, loping ahead. Greatjon's laughter shook walls as Column wound up Gold Road, banners limp in drizzle. Inside city, Ned turned to famine. Old town vessels, Lysini traders, even ironborn reavers lured by coin. He bargained for grain at triple price, drained Baelish's ledgers until the man hissed like scalded cat. The small folk saw carts arrive, and for a day forgot fear. But whispers offended, Queen at large within city, hidden in maze tunnels. Kingslayer wounded but plotting. Arya claimed she heard Lannister coins clink in backrooms of pot shops. Alchemists still missing casks. Varys surfaced, presenting 2 chests of stolen lion gold, proof of bribes, to gold cloaks. Ned banished Janos, stripped, sent north to Wall under guard. Command of watch fell to Harwin of Winterfell, a man whose loyalty came wrapped in northern snow. Weeks passed. Marches, skirmishes. Ravens told of Robb's success. Surprise raid at Wendwater Ford torched Lannister's siege train. Capture of Sergeant with orders for wildfire wagons. Liberation of river hamlets. Yet also heavy cost. Thornhill skirmish where Karstark's second son fell. 600 Northmen lost under hail of crossbow bolts from mercenary companies Tywin hired. Inside city, Ned negotiated with Iron Bank envoys, pledging repayment in spices and tolls. He cleansed alchemists' guild root and branch, executing 3 for treason. He rebuilt granaries, enrolling potters and carpenters for wage drawn from his own Winterfell reserves. Some nights he collapsed across maps, Catelyn pulling cloak over him while Quill still clenched in stiff fingers. On 10th day of 8th moon, Raven, Robb beseeched aid. The western host fighted withdrawal yet circled through Bywater, threatening his flank. He begged 2,000 fresh spears lest he be pinched between lion and hill tribes. Ned gathered what city garrison he could spare, plus volunteers. Selmy advised caution. But Ned felt the pull. A father to son, he resolved to ride personally with relief. Council protested. He was hand again, steward of King's absence. Baelish slyly offered to lead convoy himself. I wield ledgers better than lances, yet a show of trust may charm both soldier and coin. Ned refused. Your charm spends souls. Instead, he tapped Edmure Tully, newly arrived with river spears, to hold city with Selmy. Before departure, Ned visited the crypt of Baylor beneath Sept, where newly forged casks of wildfire had been resealed by loyal alchemist's oath and stacked under Faithguard. He ensured chains shackled each, and each chain lead to a winch sealed by direwolf wax. Should enemy storm city, final lever could flood tunnels, cleanse threat. But only 3 keys existed, one with Ned, one with Selmy, one with Valen. Up ramparts as sun sank, Ned clasped Caitlyn's hand. I ride to safeguard future. Keep the past for me. She pressed a locket. Wolf on one face, trout on other. Into his palm. Come back, or send word before you fall, so I may ride and drag you home. Arya watched from tower parapet, eyes fierce. Sansa wept but did not faint, and that perhaps was progress. Ned rode out under new banners, crownless direwolf quartered with stag aflame, symbol of regency in war. Beside him, Ser Brynden Tully, the Blackfish, took vanguard. Behind, 2,000 pikes, 800 archers, 300 mountain scouts from Vale commanded by Bronze Yohn. They crossed Blackwater by pontoon at dusk, hoofbeats muffled, and disappeared among whispering reeds. Road dust filled lungs, yet heart eased. Beyond walls weight fell. Nights beneath thin canvas felt more honest than silk chambers. In flicker of campfire he spoke to men of Crannog rumors, of white wolves seen near Duskendale winter past, of Hodor's laughter drifting over Winterfell walls. They listened, some smiling, some weeping for distant hearths. On 5th March night, hawk call pierced dark, scouts returned breathless. Lannister outrunners 2 leagues ahead, screens light. Lord Robb within day's ride, but lions block ford on Tumblestone. Ned ordered silent advance. At gray dawn pines parted to reveal sweep of meadow along river. Enemy camp, roared tents, pennons drooping, fires banking low. Perhaps 3,000 strong, mostly sellswords, but among them shone knight's enamel. And nearer ford a cage wagon, a stout wooden prison wherein writhed shapes. A banner above, the Glover fist, cut red. Prisoners. Ned turned to Blackfish. We strike quick, free the captives, break their line. Before sunset we join Robb. They divided. Jon Royce with bronze-clad men through ravine left. Ned, Blackfish, King's Guard, rode main. Horns low, thunder of hoof. Surprise near total, watch posts overrun, camp erupted. Sellswords fled. Knights rallied. Ned's spearhead split tents like cloth, wolves howling battle cry. He saw Clegane's helm in melee but realized it wore not Sandor, some lesser cousin. Fell him with ice's wide kiss. Blackfish cut cage lock. Glover men burst forth, ceasing dropped weapons. Yet danger nowhere sleeps. A trumpet to north answered. A second host, hidden beyond tree line. Dust roiled. Lannister banner with golden bow advanced. Stafford Lannister's fresh levy sweeping to flank Ned's now scattered charge. Sound of arrows hissed. Bronze plates rang. Royce's men fought uphill trying to rejoin. Ned rallied center by wounded oak, shouting orders above clangor. He glimpsed boy standard bearer, Umber, fall. Another snatched banner. The world shrank to blade arcs and hot breath. Hoof crash and smell of blood-soaked earth. Hour knotted into forever. At last, horns of different tone wailed. Great John Umbers. Over ridge to south, thundered Robb's cavalry. Gray cloaks streaming, gray wind ahead snarling. They hit Stafford's flank like winter gale. Lannisters buckled, rolled back across ford into river's red swirl. Sunset-stained sky same hue. When stillness came, Ned found himself kneeling among trampled reeds. Ice point in mud, arm trembling from shock. Robb dismounted before him. Father and son stared, each suddenly aware they might have met last, beneath that near-fatal hour. They clasped arms, foreheads meeting. Never steal my thunder again. Robb laughed, half sobbing. Win quicker and I'll have no chance, Ned answered, voice hoarse. Losses tallied, 300 Northmen, 200 Vale, near 800 Sellswords and Lion Knights. But prisoners freed. Ford cleared. Lannister host fractured. Robb's army now near 7,000, battle-tested, morale fierce. They burned enemy supply wagons, fed captured grain into their own ranks. Campfires that night sparked bright under clearing sky. Ned sat with Robb and great captains plotting next march. Tywin still held 30,000 near Harrenhal. Edmure fought raids along Red Fork. Renly dithered at King's Landing with Tyrell's wary. Stannis awaited outcome before committing full strike. Robb argued to press west, relieve Riverlands, turn Tywin's flank. Ned weighed peril of stretching supply. In the end, they agreed. Split force. Robb continue guerrilla along Tumblestone, drawing Lion out. Ned ride further south, intercept siege equipment bound for Harrenhal, disrupt lines and then return to city to report. The farewell at dawn came gentle. Robb clapped shoulder, eyes bright with purpose. Send my love to mother. Tell Arya I found her missing cat and he bit me twice. Ned smiled, rode east with 2 cohorts. Days later ravens overtook him, news from city. Selmy had uncovered conspiracy within Gold Cloaks to open River Gate to Queen's loyalists. Plot foiled. Ringleaders hang. Grain shipments from Reach arriving. Renly boasted feast of reconciliation. Stannis returned to capital, crowned fully in Great Hall. Announced reforms. Excise tax cut, judges empowered against corruption. One day each fortnight he would hear petitions personally. But darker note. Tyrion Lannister escaped Vale, reached father's camp, now marshalling Selzord Legion of Second Sons. Also, Balon Greyjoy's longships raided Stony Shore, a north vulnerable. Ned pressed company hard. He reached city outskirts to fresh alarm, plague of coughing flux stalking riverwards. Easing famine had brought throngs from countryside. Now disease stalked the weak. He summoned Pycelle's best apothecaries, commandeered septs as infirmaries, ordered quarantine on Wharf District. Some cursed him, some prayed. Through work, dread hovered. Cersei still unseen. Rumor placed her at Rock, at Tetonge Harbor, in disguise within brothel. Eris insisted Queen Spy Master Qyburn spirited her through tunnel, under city. Yet no proof. The children remained within tower under Septon watch. Joffrey fumed. Tommen cried at night. Myrcella grew pale. One dusk Arya burst into solar, cheeks flushed. Found the queen, she panted. She hides beneath Dragon Pit tunnels with Meryn Trant and 30 men. They plot to snatch Joffrey tonight. Ned's blood iced, but he believed. He armed quietly, gathered Selmy Hound, Sandor had sworn to Stark after Wildfire plot, and loyal cloaks. They slipped into tunnels where dragon bones once slept. Stale air tasted of guano and mold. Arya led nimble, torch in hand. Through vault arch, they spied glow ahead. Torches around wagon. Children's muffled sobs. Cersei's voice sharp. Quickly, before first watch changes. The spiders' spies swarm. Ned signaled. They rushed. Swords flashed. Meryn Trant met Selmy in clang that sent sparks. Sandor slammed 2 gold cloaks left with shield edge, snarling Kingslayer's dead due. Cersei drew a slim blade at Arya, yet the girl ducked, needle flashed, nicked Queen's wrist. Cersei shrieked. Ned seized her arm. Enough. He wrenched blade free, threw it clattering. Joffrey bound and gagged, glared hate. Tommen quivered. Myrcella whispered thanks. They escorted Queen and guard up to daylight where Stannis awaited. Priests of Arelor flanking. Flames of braziers painted red across Cersei's face. She spat at Stannis. Usurper twice over. When lions roar, this petty flame will gutter. Stannis' gaze flinty. I am the sword of lawful fire. He turned to Septon. Proceed. By council vote, Queen condemned to take the black. For murder, treason, arson. Traditional penalty beheading debated. Ned argued Night's Watch needed watchers more than Realm needed another ghost, and Symbol might heal. Some cried scandal, but Septon relented. That night, Cersei, shaved of hair, bound in black cloak, escorted north with Janos Slint's convoy. How she cursed. Joffrey too judged, but for innocence of youth, The black cells deep within Red Keep claimed him, Septons visiting daily. Tommen and Myrcella fostered with faith at Old Town, on Merchant Cog, under heavy guard. When ravens bore news to Tywin, Harrenhal's forges grew louder, but many western lords winced. They loved their kin, yet faith still held meaning, and Ned's leniency looked near merciful. Winter winds drifted south as war dragged on. Gray skies seldom lifted. But within city, grain sufficed. Plague held. Stannis sat sharp in processions of justice, with Ned at right, Renly at left, lords presenting roads repaired. A year after Robert's death, on the first snowfall to dust the Red Keep in 3 decades, Stannis proclaimed new royal charter. Half the Crownland's revenue to fund Night's Watch defenses, restoration of storms and libraries, stricter oversight of alchemists. He named Robb Stark Lord Protector of the Trident for service, Greatjon Warden of Northern Marches, Marguerite Tyrell betrothed to Garland, rather than king to soothe Reach pride. Peace did not arrive all at once. Tywin clung. Greyjoys raided, Dornish princes tested southern marches. Yet kingdom found breath, and songs began, of wolf who kneeled, of girl who found the fire, of night the queen fled howling. Minstrels sang them in taverns from Gulltown to White Harbor, unsure whether they praised Stark or Baratheon, but certain that truth, once unsheathed, cut deeper than any sword. One twilight, Ned Stark stood upon balcony of Tower of the Hand, winter cloak fluttering. Snowflakes touched his beard, melting instantly. He watched children at play in courtyard below, Arya sparring with Tommen under Selmy's eye, Sansa slipping arm through Margaery's as they strolled among frosted hedges. Steam curled from kitchens, carrying scent of cinnamon and fresh-baked bread. Catelyn approached, wrapping arms around him. "You never told me what temple gave you such patience." "The gods would in every quiet moment," he said, resting chin on her red hair. "And perhaps the memory of those who died when there was none." "Will it last?" she asked, gaze on the snow-kissed city. "Nothing lasts," he answered. "Yet, some things endure long enough." She smiled. "Long enough for spring?" He pulled her closer. "Long enough for our grandchildren to know spring songs." Beneath them, Arya laughed at Tommen's clumsy thrust. Beyond, bells tolled vespers, peaceful notes drifting over rooftops. Ned closed his eyes. The pack had scattered across wars and worries, but somehow, against lions' roar, wildfires hiss, and winter's howl, it had survived. And as first true snow settled on the Red Keep's ancient stones, he thought perhaps even in this southern realm the north had brought a breath of quiet, cold strong enough to still the turbulence of men. For now, A.K. Thought. A fortnight after the first snows glazed the roofs of King's Landing, the White Raven arrived from Old Town. Its pale wings beat a solemn cadence over the city, and folk who glimpsed it whispered of winter made true. In the Tower of the Hand, Maester Valen eased the raven onto Ned Stark's sleeve. The bird's milky eyes caught the torchlight like chips of moonstone, and the parchment bound to its leg bore a single rune burned in black wax. The conclave's unanimous decree that the long summer had ended. Ned read the message in silence, feeling the chill of foreknowledge seep through his bones. When he looked up, Valen studied him with scholarly detachment. 24 maesters took the vote, the old man said. They measure sun and sky, the tilt of swallows' wings. They have not erred in 100 years. Then no council may gainsay them, Ned answered. He stroked the raven's feathers once, a gesture half gratitude, half pity, and released it to fly free through the high lancet window. The bird vanished into low cloud. White upon white, Ned watched until only the emptiness of the sky remained. He convened the court that afternoon in the hall of 100 hearths, each hearth stoked high with cedar logs. Yet still the cold pressed in like a living thing. Stannis Baratheon sat the throne of the Dragon Kings, crown of weathered iron upon his brow. His new banners, stag within a heart of fire, draped the walls, but between them hung the direwolf of Stark, the rose of Tyrell, and the falcon of Arryn, symbols of a fragile concord. Lords filled the tiered galleries in cloaks of sable and russet, azure and gray, while small folk crowded the outer aisles, eyes wide at the roaring fires. Ned stepped forward and spoke without flourish. "Winter is declared." A rustle passed through the throng. A soft gasp here and there, the murmur of men calculating grain stores, coal reserves, timber rights. "We have seen long summers breed long indolence. We must be diligent. Every house shall tithe a fifth of its harvest to the winter wardens of the crown lands. The granaries of King's Landing shall ration bread at fair price, and no man shall hoard food for profit while children starve." Yin how. Mace Tyrell shifted in his seat, but voiced no protest. The Reach had grain to spare and sought to mend its name after rumors of famine profiteering. Bronze Yon Royce nodded solemn approval. Only Giles Rosby ventured a cough of dissent, but under Stannis' unwavering stare even that withered into silence. When the decrees were sealed, the hand sought the queenly galleries where Catelyn stood wrapped in a silver fox mantle Sansa had sewn. "Robb writes from the Tumblestone," she told him. "Tywin's host retreats, but they leave scorched villages behind." "Robb will not give chase across burned earth," Ned said. "He needs supply lines and the people need shelter." Catelyn's eyes glistened, though pride steadied her voice. "He sends wagons of river grain to the small folk whose fields were fired." "That is your son." Ned kissed her brow. "That is our son." Days turned like slow millstones. Snow fell in capricious flurries across the south, dusting septry roofs and blanketing the Kingswood in silence. In the north, ravens reported drifts deep as a man's chest at the Dreadfort, and lakes frozen solid at Last Hearth. Up at Castle Black, Lord Commander Jorah Mormont wrote of white shadows glimpsed beyond the far tree line, of abandoned wildling camps whose fires were found still smoldering yet ringed with prints that led nowhere. One night, as Ned penned letters to Robb, and to the Lords of the Vale requesting additional wagons of oats, the door opened without warning. Arya darted inside, cheeks flushed from running. Behind her loomed Sandor Clegane, leaning on the pommel of his greatsword. "Found him," Arya breathed. She held up a small leather satchel, its drawstrings dark with dried blood. Clegane tossed a severed ear onto the desk. "Belonged to the pyromancer Jason Byre," he said. "Caught him hiding in the Blackcell's forgotten pits. Thought to sell wildfire to sell sales." Ned unfastened the satchel. Inside lay 6 vials of lurid green, thick as serpent venom. He felt his stomach tighten. "How many more?" 300 at least, Clegane said. "We took half. The rest?" He shrugged. "Might be under sty or stable. Best burn the whole city if you want them all." "Father," Arya said, eyes shining with fierce satisfaction. "I kept him from biting off his own tongue. Can I have Needle back now?" Ned regarded her, torn between anger and reluctant admiration. "How did you find him?" "He kept a sparrow's feather in his boot heel and used it to pick locks," she said. "Tells the rats everything when you threaten to hang him by his eyelids." Clegane barked a laugh. "Little she-wolf's got teeth." Ned dispatched messengers to Sir Barristan at once, ordering a purge of every cell beneath the Red Keep, and to Valen that the wildfire be sealed in a lead-lined vault under triple guard. Then he knelt to meet Arya's eyes. "Needle is yours, but you must train under Sir Barristan each dawn and with Master of Arms Brian at dusk. A blade obeys the will that wields it, and your will must be steadier than wildfire." Her grin could have melted winter. The next moon brought crimson tidings from the west. Ravens bearing the seal of the direwolf arrived at dawn bearing a single name. "Carhold?" Robb's hand trembled across the page. Carhold burned, the great hall gutted, its lord. Rickard Karstark, slain defending children too young to hold swords. The killers wore no banners, but survivors whispered of Salsales who spoke the dialect of the free cities, and of a gaunt sorcerer whose eyes glowed unnatural violet in torchlight. Ned felt the old ache of helplessness, the ghosts of the Tower of Joy stirring in his memory. He read the letter again, then sent for Stannis. The king arrived in plain leather, crown absent. More dead. Carhold is ashes. Ned slid the parchment forward. Tywin denies ordering it. If Salsales did this, Coin hired them, and Coin still guides their blades. Stannis' brow furrowed. Coin in Casterly Rock? or across the narrow sea. Ned tapped the line about violet eyes. There are those in Bravos who traffic such men. Stannis exhaled frost. I will send envoys to the Iron Bank. They value trade more than lions and wolves. If Tywin is borrowing, they will speak, for a price. And the price? Collateral titles. Holdings in the Crown lands. Perhaps even Dragonstone's port fees. Stannis' mouth thinned. We will pay. Ned studied the flicker of candlelight in the king's iron eyes. Stannis would bleed stone before he bled pride, but bleed he would. The North will offer grain tithes. Keep them, the king said. Winter is its own lord in your country. I have my own debts with winter. While envoys sailed, the capital turned inward to survival. Fires burned in the street of Flower night and day as bakers labored under guard to bake black bread from coarse rye. Sansa oversaw the soup kitchens, ladling turnip stew for ragged urchins, her furs dusted with flour. Beside her, Margaery Tyrell sang Highgarden harvest songs, teaching children to clap in rhythm. One evening Ned watched from afar and caught his elder daughter's eye. She smiled, shy but solid, and waved him over. You should try the broth, she urged. It is unrefined, but it fills. It humbles, Margaery added, eyes crinkling at him. And humility is the salt of virtue. Ned tasted. It was thin, yes, but some spice warmed the tongue. He thanked the cooks and moved on. But the memory stayed. Sansa's quiet purpose. The faint echo of her mother's resolve. Autumn dwindled into steel-edged winter. Skies over Blackwater Bay grew pewter gray, and the docks hung thick with hoarfrost by dawn. On a morning when frost feathers crept up the inside of tower windows, Vaelin burst into the council chamber breathless. Raven from Robb Stark, he croaked. The Westerlands host sues for truce. Tywin Lannister sends his brother Sir Kevan to treat under flag of parley. Stannis, Renly, Mace, and Royce all turned to Ned, waiting. Ned unfolded the Raven scroll. Robb's hand was firm this time. He says the old lion will withdraw past Ashmark and yield hostages. 50 sons of Major Bannerman. In return, we must send back the queen unmolested. Renly scoffed. He admits he cannot break us. Keep the queen and press the advantage. Stannis' voice cut like winter wind. No wiser folly than seizing victory than spitting it. We cannot feed 2 wars while snow buries roads. Accept his hostages, send the woman home, and we save coin, grain, and blood. Ned's thumb brushed along the parchment's edge. He remembered the black cells, Cersei's spittle, the smell of wildfire on her. Yet he also pictured hostages, boys barely grown, delivered in chains. We will send Cersei to the Rock, he said at last, under escort and oath of peace. Any breach of truce and she becomes traitor anew. That night, he met the queen in her cell. She was gaunt, but still wore pride as armor. Sending me home, she hissed. Do you think chains will hold lions? I will raise Joffrey's banner, and the realm will answer. Ned kept his voice even. Raise it and break truce. The Faith, the North, and the Reach will march as one. You know how that ends. Nay, and the general. Cersei stared, eyes twin emerald fires. Then she laughed, a sound like glass breaking. I know how everything ends. In ash. 3 days later, she departed under guard of Jon Royce, Brian of Tarth, and 50 knights sworn to the Mother's mercy, riding west along snow-crusted roads. Joffrey remained caged in the Red Keep. When Ned watched the column vanish beyond the river gate, he murmured a quiet hope that the hostages would come safe, and the truce would hold past winter's heart. Yet, the winds beyond the wall cared nothing for truces. In the frost-shrouded north, the Night's Watch sent raven upon raven, each darker than the last. One screamed of skirmishes with dead things that walked again, their eyes ice blue. Another told of Corin half-hands ranging lost in the Frostfangs. And finally, a sealed letter written in Lord Commander Mormont's own blood. We ride for the fist of the first men. If this message fails, know the long night stirs. Ned read the crimson letters beneath a storm lamp, hands shaking. Here was a war no coin could parley. No grain could ease. He went at once to Stannis. The king listened stone-faced. "We will send men," he said, "but I cannot spare 10,000 when Tywin still breathes." "Send 500, Ned pressed. "Seasoned rangers, mountain men, free riders. I will lead them." Stannis' brows drew together. The hand rides north, leaving court. Ambition cold as ice. "Duty," Ned replied. "I left bastards and babes to another man's mercy once. I will not leave all of Westeros to shadows." "No." That night he wrote to Robb, to Mace de Bronjean, and to Lord Stark Bannerman, still wintering in White Harbor. "Send men sworn to knight's cause." By dawn ravens flapped northward like black arrows. He chose his company carefully. Sandor Clegane, whose hatred of fire mattered little beneath killing frost. Brienne of Tarth returned from escort. Qyburn, imprisoned but offered clemency for knowledge of corpse rot. And Arya, 16 now, whose genius with blade and stealth had grown fearsome. Sansa wept to see them go. But her tears carried strength, not weakness. She swore to keep the soup kitchens open and the court honest until their return. Catelyn caught Ned by the sleeve at the king's gate. "Bring our children home," she whispered. He nodded, but could not voice the fear inside him. That home might lie buried beneath endless snow. They rode hard along the King's Road, past villages shuttered tight against cold, past white-capped hills where icicles hung from watchtowers like teeth. In Maidenpool, townsfolk pressed salt cod and pitch for their fires upon the company, and Arya traded a quick lesson in swordplay for a stray dog that followed them north. In Harrenhal's black shadow they rested a night, hearing distant hammering as Tywin smiths forged wains to carry his remaining siege stores west. At the Trident they met Robb Stark, leaner now, harder, but his hug nearly crushed Ned's ribs. Grey wind patted at his side, muzzle streaked with gray. "Father," Robb said, "winter suits you, or you suit winter." "I ride to it," Ned answered. They spoke long by fire. Robb would escort their column through the neck. He had promised Lady Maege Mormont her youngest daughter would join the ranging. The girl, Lyra, rode bareheaded under pelting snow, laughing each mile. Crossing Moat Cailin proved slow. The causeway stones were slick with black ice, and 2 horses broke legs. Yet beyond, vast empty leagues of white opened beneath pale sky. Nights the aurora shimmered like a dying dragon's breath. Sandor muttered that the sky bled green, while Qyburn recorded it in his morbid journal. At White Harbor, the Manderleys feasted them on salt pork and onion ale. Lord Wyman had lost 2 stone since the first frost, but still rose from his chair to greet Ned. "My ovens bake half what they did," he admitted. "Yet for you," he clapped, and servants carried out steaming pies shaped as direwolves. To feed courage, 200 Manderley men joined the column, 50 bearded sistermen, and a score of spearwives willing to leave newborn babes with kin, so the babes might yet know a sun-thawed summer. North of Long Lake, the snow deepened. On the high ridges, Ned's scouts found sigils carved into drifts, spirals of bone, circles of blackened wood, markings wildlings claimed foretold the others' trails. Brienne broke one with a swing of her sword. "No sign but what men can trample," she said, voice tight. 10 days further, and the wall rose before them, a glimmering wall of frozen moonlight, stretching from horizon to horizon to horizon. The guards at Queensgate hoisted torches, calling welcomes. Jon Snow met them at the top of the icy stairs. His black cloak flapped in the gale, but his greeting warmed Ned more than any hearth. "Rangers gone 3 weeks," Jon said by lamplight in the old keep's drafty hall. "No word. Ravens sent south never arrived. I think the skies eat them." Ned placed a steady hand on the boys. "No," the man's shoulder. "Then we ride to find them." They left at dawn through the north gate, 300 strong beneath banners of direwolf and crowned stag. Over wind-swept hardpack they marched, the sound of their sleds like harsh whispers. That first night, a storm blackened the sky. Snow swirled so thick, it seemed the world dissolved in white noise. Ned huddled in his cloak, listening to the hiss of sleet on canvas. Somewhere in that howling void, he fancied he heard Robb's distant voice, or perhaps Rickon's laughter echoing from years past. They pressed on. Ghost padded ahead, crimson eyes luminous. Once he returned, muzzle crusted with rime, and led them to a hill where 8 men lay frozen in twisted shapes. Faces gray. Eyes burst with black frost. All wore cloaks of the Night's Watch. Their blades were drawn but unbloodied. No tracks led away. Qyburn examined them, pronouncing without flinch, "Died of terror, not steel." On the slopes of the Milkwater, they found Mormont's camp, tents shredded, fires cold, bodies slumped where sleep claimed them forever. The old bear himself lay against a boulder, Raven perched upon shoulder as if refusing farewell. Jon Snow knelt beside his fallen commander, snow melting on cheeks. He fought to last breath. Jon whispered, noting broken sword in Mormont's grasp. "I will carry his oath for him." Ned's silence was answer enough. They buried the fallen beneath stones, for the ground was too hard to dig. As they labored, the wind shifted, carrying distant shrieks, thin as shattered glass. Wolves. The direwolves bristled, hackles rising. They were not wolves. That night, the others came. It began with cold, true cold, sharp as knives carving through furs. Then shapes slid between the trees, tall and pallid, their armor whispering like cracking ice. Blue eyes burned with ancient malice. One raised an arm and frost rippled across the snow like lightning. A Manderly spear shattered, its bearer screamed as fingers blackened in an instant. Ned drew ice, its Valyrian steel singing a sad high note that hung in the brittle air. Brienne planted her feet, greatsword clutched two-handed. Sandor cursed fire and frost alike, hacking with combined fear and fury. Jon Snow swung Longclaw, Dawnwolf pale against the dark. The first other glided forward, blade thin as moonlight. Ice met it with a clash that rang like bells of crystal. Sparks of blue and red scattered. Ned felt bone jar in elbow and shoulder. Nevertheless, he stepped in, pivoted, swept low. The Valyrian edge carved a bright crescent. The other's leg fell away, shattering to icy shards. It hissed, voice of cracking glaciers, and lunged blindly. Brienne's sword sheared its head clean. The fragments scattered like diamond dust on wind. More pressed in. Their blades left trails of rime. Arrows bounced harmless. Qyburn hurled wildfire vials, and sudden green conflagrations flared. 2 others dissolved, shouting ice screams, yet the flames cast eerie shadows that danced like specters. Arya and Lyra Mormont darted in tandem, needle and dirk striking where joints of frost steel met shimmering mail. They fought beneath the ghostly light, figures inked onto emerald canvas. But for each foe felled, 2 more emerged. The company began to buckle, retreating toward a crag of black stone. Ned's breaths rasped icicles. Sandor stumbled. Half his sword rhymed. A frost blade sliced his shoulder, exposing charred flesh beneath. The cold hissed against old burn. Arya forced him up, shouting words lost in gale. Jon rallied the rear. He parried a blow that nipped 3 inches of Longclaw's tip to shards, then plunged the broken blade into the other's chest. It screamed and burst apart, but the shock spun Jon to his knees. Ghost leapt upon another, jaw-crushing crystalline forearm. The creature shattered the direwolf aside, yet Ghost landed, rose, and threw itself once more. Ned saw his son, foster son, threatened by a towering figure whose crown of ice horns marked it higher among the damned. He charged. The world narrows to 2 blades, one red-gray steel, and one frozen starlight. The clash threw up sparks of frost and ash. With every parry, Ned's arms numbed. His muscles cried for surrender. A scream cut the night, not of pain but of sorcery. Melisandre of Eshai strode forward, scarlet robes billowing. "Ash shall devour ice," she cried, and cast something small and burning. Fire burst like a crimson sun, swirling about her in a vortex, licking skyward. The others hissed, backing in confusion. Yet the flame did not burn Ned's men. It parted around them like water. The crowned other thrust through the swirl. Melisandre shrieked in exhaustion. Before the ice blade struck, a massive hammer swung over Ned's shoulder. Gendry, bastard of Baratheon, smith turned warrior, crashed his blacksmith maul full into the other's chest. The creature burst apart in a cascade of ice splinters. In that instant, The others wavered. Some retreated, merging with snow squalls. Some collapsed as if strings cut. Ned seized the moment. "Stand," he roared, voice ragged. "Steel and fire." They charged. Valyrian edges, master hammers, wildfire jars, every weapon of men hammered at ancient night. At dawn, a hush descended. Snow still fell, but softly, as though relieved. Bodies, both flesh and ice, littered the clearing. Many of Ned's men lay among them. Jon's second son, 2 Manderleys, 6 Watchers, Qyburn pierced by a shard he sought to collect. Yet against the odds, they had endured. Jon knelt by Ghost, binding a rent in the direwolf's white flank. Brienne and Sandor leaned on swords, breath pluming. Arya wiped blood from needle, eyes glazed with grief and feral pride. Ned looked to Melisandre. The red woman's skin was pallid, her ruby dark and cracked. "The Lord of Light burns bright tonight," she whispered, and collapsed. Gendry caught her, cradled her like ironwork, precious beyond measure. They burned the dead, both their own and the shattered remnants of others, upon pyres that raged high as towers. The smoke drifted south, herald of battles unseen. Jon Snow set the old bear's cloak upon the highest pyre, tears freezing on cheeks. Ned spoke the words of the Night's Watch beside him. When flames dwindled, they gathered in the shadow of the wall. Winter sunlight filtered weakly through ragged clouds. Ned stood before them, sword point planted in black earth. "Twice I have seen honor tempered by cold steel," he said. "First against kings who would be tyrants, now against darkness none but children's tales recalled. We held, but spring will not come on its own. We must be its herald." He named Jon Snow, acting Lord Commander, until the Watch chose anew. He left Melisandre in the care of the healers at Castle Black. Her life flickered like candle stub, yet Jon insisted she be kept warm. Sandor swore he would remain as Jon's Gaoler against future flames, muttering, "Better snow than wildfire." Ned took half his surviving folk south. Arya, Brienne, Gendry, the grievously wounded. They traveled slowly, bearing news written in blood. At Mole's Town, wildlings greeted them, led by Tormund Giantsbane, who offered mammoth jerky and a cask of sour goat's milk in truce. "Your crows fought shadows," he grinned. "We'll stick with crows that kill shadow." Ned accepted a fragile alliance. Weeks later they crossed Torrhen's Square, where Robb, letters in hand, met them on frost-bitten road. He had learned of the other war from ravens too sparse. Seeing his father alive, he bowed head, shoulders shaking. Then he straightened and spoke grimly. "Tywin marches again. Truce broken. Queen's escort ambushed en route to the rock. Brigands took her, say they wore Kraken's sigils. Now the lion roars and banners answer." So winter's second storm gathered. Greyjoy striking west, lions blood-mad. The reach unsteady, Dorne's silent. And in the far north a darkness only wounded, not slain. Ned felt the weight of years yet bore it. He lifted ice to the pale sky, the blade reflecting cold light like promise. "The pack survives," he said. Robb echoed. Arya, lips blue, echoed. Brienne, Gendry, even Tormund repeated. Voices rising like distant thunder. They turned south once more, where war waited, and beyond war a kingdom that must survive even winter, or perish under endless night. Yaka. Snow peeled away from the roofs of Torrhen's Square in ragged white sheets, as the sun dragged itself above the horizon, weak and colorless. A hush clung to the bailey, broken only by the crump of frost dropping from hoar-frosted beams and the croak of a raven perched upon a splintered flagpole. Ned Stark felt the ancient keep beneath his boots like a slumbering beast. Every stone seemed to hum with memories older than any crown. He stood at the battlements beside Robb, gray cloaks snapping behind them in the brittle wind, and read the letter again. The letter that had flown south on midnight wings to slice what little piece they had salvaged from winter's maw. Tywin Lannister had broken his word. According to the ink, now smudging Ned's glove, the western host had crossed the Tumblestone in 3 forks at once. Bannermen from Banefort, Craigahall, and the Westerling Hills rode beneath new black pennons, marked only with a red slash of paint. Robbed scouts claimed the sigil-less banners carried men wed to no lord but gold. A sellsword tie commanded by the imp himself, Tyrion Lannister, now returned from the east swaddled in the coin of foreign princes. And somewhere in the uprising din of steel and horn, Cersei Lannister had vanished anew, stolen from her escort, by raiders wearing Kraken badges stitched in haste. Balon mustered more sails than we knew, Robb murmured. His breath curled white. Either he means to ransom her, or crush her hope of ever seeing the Rock again. Ned slid the missive into his sleeve. Balon Greyjoy bargains in salt and flame. He will crown himself afresh with any hostage worth the silver. Yet Cersei was never his prize. Tywin's honor is. The old lion marches because his pride bleeds. Bench and he will smother every threshing floor south of the neck to staunch it. Robb's fingers drummed the rough stone. Let me ride, father. Grey Wind's teeth are sharp, and my spearline is longer since Tully vassals joined. Give me the western front, and I will clip the lion's claws before they touch barley. Ned watched the horizon where the pale disk of the sun floated like a dying coal. War on three fronts. The cracked crown lands, the riverlands ravened by vengeful lions, the icy north where the others stirred. He thought of Bran's sweet voice asking once how many swords a king must shoulder before they shear his arms from socket. We ride together, he said at last. Take half your host west and chase the lion's shadow across the tumbling hills. I ride south along the King's Road with 2,000 Karstark spears, Mormont axes, and the volunteers left from our wall foray. We bar their crossing at Harrenhal's burnt gates and hold them there until winter roots their horses to the mud. Robb's mouth set, iron hard. And the Greyjoys? Stannis will send red wines by sea. Ned almost smiled at the thought of Tyrell wine lords answering a Baratheon king, but now the Reach obeyed whomever promised bread. With luck those Greenwater sailors will know a Kraken's habits better than we. If they fail. His eyes narrowed, wolf gray. The Ironborn raiding will end on a northern quay, one way or another. They clasped wrists beneath the first clamor of horns calling the camps to breaking. In the yard below, men fetched saddles rimed with ice, and the clash of smithy hammers rang like deep bells. The march south bit deep. Snowbanks rose higher than horse withers in the pines along the King's Road, and icy winds moaned through ghost branches. Ned's column wound like a drab snake behind shaggy destriers clothed in cracked leather. Beside him rode Brienne, bandaged at the ribs where an other shard had grazed her, but still strong enough to wield Oathkeeper. The banner of the direwolf flapped above them, threadbare but still proud. On the 10th day, the ground thawed into sucking mire. Dead grass showed under the snow's retreat like the pale hide of an old wound. Ned ordered the iron-shod wagons to skirt a hillside dotted with charred crofts. The work of Tywin's vanguard, scouts said. In one blackened cottage, they found a lone woman, eyes milk-blind, rocking the swaddled bones of an infant turned stone-cold weeks before. Arya knelt, pressed water to the woman's lips, then slit the remnant roof so Sky might claim the smoke when they burned it down. No one spoke as the flames spat into night. The next morning, half-frozen sleet rattled armor links as they reached the Red Fork. Its banks were a churn of ice pans grinding toward the neck, yet the bridge held. On the far shore, 100 red hand banners rose above muddy breastworks. Rivermen, posted by Edmure Tully to watch for lion outriders. The captain, a gaunt Mallister cousin, saluted Ned with flagging vigor. Sir Davin Lannister rode east yesterday. 2,000 horse and sellsword archers, bound for the crossroads. His eyes lingered on Brienne's greatsword, the blood-dark armor of the Hound. Arya's frosted curls. They will outpace you, if you hug the road. Road is life for our wounded, Ned replied. But steel is choice. We'll bleed pace to keep blades bright. Let the lions gallop into their own roar. At Harrenhal, the burnt castle loomed against purple sky like the ribcage of some colossal beast. Fires twinkled in shattered windows. Tywin had left garrison. Ned's outriders cut down a scout patrol at dusk. 6 sellswords from the Golden Company, skull tattoos half-healed. The dead men's satchels held orders scribbled in Volantene glyphs. Hold fast. Delay the wolves. The lion comes. Ice slid back into its sheath with savage finality. Ned arrayed his host among the twisted oak groves flanking the God's Eye. Stakes braced, trenches dug. Karstark men wove trotskins and flaxes into nets to snare horses. Ironwood boughs waited under oilcloth for the sun. The smell of pitch hung thick. They waited 3 days, dawn to dusk, listening to distant thuds of siege rams testing Harrenhal's raw throat. Finally, the lion banners crested the western rise. Scarlet tide under storm clouds, a flutter of black pennons scattered among them. Mercenary wings. Drummers pounded a savage rhythm, while the wind carried a thin shrill of pipes. Ned's heart climbed calmly into his throat. When horns gave the cry, the world convulsed. Cavalry smashed against angled stakes. Mounts screamed, spilling riders into pits of sharpened branches. Northern arrows cracked the air, and sellsword lines crumpled like rye in a scythe wind. Yet the lions pushed. Heavy knights encased in gilded steel hammering forward, hooves churning snow and mud alike. At their center, Davin Lannister's gold helm glinted bronze red with sunset. Brienne met him in the tumult. Her blade rang off his shield, sparking, then slipped to bite his thigh. He toppled. Karstark swarmed him like winter wolves. But for every knight, unhorsed, 2 more rode in. By dusk the camps ran red and white together, and the scent of blood drowned the tang of pine. Ned rallied the lion 5 times, Ice singing ice blood songs. Sandor's greatsword hewed a path to Ned's flank, roar echoing between ruined towers. Arya danced between legs and shields, needle-finding seams. Night fell, and still the battle snarled. Fires leapt from smashed siege wagons, throwing orange claws onto the God's Eye's mirrored surface. At moonrise, the lions withdrew in ragged clusters, back across fields trampled into slurry, their banners drooping like dead leaves. Ned's men did not cheer. They were too spent to voice more than groans as they dragged the wounded to makeshift tents of battered canvas. When dawn broke over black smoke, Ned walked the carnage with Maester Luwin's eldest apprentice. They counted 300 dead Northmen, near 500 mercenaries, and 200 Lannister knights. Yet the garrison within Harrenhal still fired bolts from arrow slits, and beyond the western ridge, a dust plume hinted that more red tents pitched even now. The battle had maimed the lion's advance, but not broken its spine. Under the skull of a toppled gargoyle, they found Brienne kneeling by a corpse in fluted mail. She wiped blood from her cheek with a torn scrap of crimson cloak. He begged for mercy, she said, eyes flat. Spoke of daughters. I remembered Lord Karstark's sons. She pressed the shard of Davin's broken sword into Ned's hand. No daughters orphaned tonight. Ned closed her fingers around the steel. Mercy survives in winter when we choose our whetstones. He looked across the shattered plain. In the swirl of drifting ash, he almost saw the weirwood of Winterfell, branches heavy with snow, and heard the wind sing the old words, "The pack survives." A fortnight of skirmish followed, night raids on lion pickets, shock thrusts to sever supply lines, quick feints by torchlight to fracture enemy nerve. Yet word crept from south and west of Speartips, blossoming under Lannister gold. Ser Adam Marbrand assailed the Gold Road. Ser Forley Prester roused Craighal's levies. And somewhere near the Blackwater, a smaller lion brood under Tyrion himself stacked stores onto barges flown with black sails. Worse, ravens brought chilling omen from the wall. Jon Snow's scouts vanished beyond the Shadow Tower. One survivor staggered back babbling of a giant white spider walking on 2 legs. Icicles for limbs! Ned pressed the parchment to his chest and felt his pulse hammering like a smith's hammer. When the second white raven flew, this one bearing the signature of Archmaester Valen himself, End's legs nearly gave. The glass candles burned in Old Town, the message read, and dreamers speak of a spear of ice piercing the dawn. The citadel begged the king to send dragons. If any still lived in myth or stone. If any still lived. On a frost-silver dawn, Ned gathered his command beneath a felled oak at the edge of the God's Eye. His cloak hung heavy with caked mud. Ice's pommel glimmered pale in weak sun. Arya Brienne, Sandor, Lyra Mormont, and the captains of Karstark, Tallheart, and Manderley formed a grim crescent before him. "We have two wars," Ned began. "One in shadows older than the first men, one in shadows cast by Lionfire. If we linger here, the darkness will swallow both fronts. We cut free." He pointed northwest. "Tallheart rides by greenways to warn Robb. Karstark's spears hold the line here, drawing Tywin's gaze to Harrenhal's ruin. The rest follow me. We strike for King's Landing and carve the dwarf's supply route from the city." Sandor spat. "Cut the cub's belly and old Tywin limps." Brienne lifted her chin. "If the lion breaks north after, Karstark alone bleeds." Karstark bled at the Twins and at Wintertown. The gaunt Lord Harrion Karstark answered, "We hold again. My father's ghost would skewer me if I did less." Ned read strength in their battered faces. Fear coiled behind his ribs, fear for Robb, for Sansa, for a north draped in night. But there was no other path. That evening, as the sun bled red across tangled pines, Ned walked alone to the lake shore. Shattered arrow shafts bobbed in the shallows. The ruined towers of Harrenhal brooded behind like broken talons. He knelt in the damp cinders, fingers brushing dark water. It was said the god's eye reflected truth. In its glassy surface, he saw a weary face lined by frost and soot. But behind his own eyes, he saw something fiercer, the howling white of the wall, the slow flare of dawn beyond black stone, and a sword of flame no smith of men had yet forged. "Lyanna," he whispered to Grey Ripples, "keep them safe while I ride." The water's shimmer might have been reply, or only the wind. They rode with torches shuttered, cloaks turned inside out, banners furled. Midnight frost crusted the fields, but they moved quick, skirts of lake fog cloaking hoofbeats. Arya rode rangy mare beside Brienne, trading whispered tales of Braavosi water dancers, while scanning dark hedgerows with stolen cat's eyes. Sandor scouted the flanks, scarred face painted with ash to hide pale flesh. 3 nights on, they reached the crossroads where the Whispering Woods remnants still whispered of old blood. There Ned's vanguard struck the dwarf supply line. Tyrion, clever as song, had loaded barges with casks of Jane's wildfire, to drift downriver by moonlight. One spark upon that current, and the trident's reeds would blaze a path to the capital. Manderley rivercraft, cloaked in deer hides, slid out to snare the barges. On the bank, Ned's axemen toppled the escort screens, seizing longbowmen before alarms rose. In the hush before dawn, wildfire casks were rolled into deep pools and sunk beneath weighted chains. Green flickers died in the murk with soft hisses. Tyrion's wrath followed swift. At midday, a column of sellsword free riders bolted from the trees, sabers flashing. Ned answered with Karstark cavaliers. Amid the clash, ice met the sellsword captain's curving blade. Valyrian steel trumped Volantine glamour, and the captain's head rolled on moss. Arya hamstrung a horse, vaulted, skewered the rider through mailseam. Brienne blocked a blow meant for Manderley bannerman, Oathkeeper wailing like a storm lute. When the last mercenary fled, Sandor limped from brush, helm dented. "Bloody dwarf's temper shows," he grunted. Yet victory whispered heavier tidings, a message sewn inside the captain's cloak. Orders in Tyrion's crabbed hand to steer Wildfire to a secret cove at Duskendale, where a Braavosi fleet waited. Ned crushed the vellum. If Braavos pledges coin to Lion, Stannis starves come spring. Arya squinted at the foreign glyphs. Ciri said the Iron Bank bets only on winners. Then we must teach them they wager on ghosts, Ned replied. By stealth track and hunter's moon, they reached the Kingswood, its broadleaf skeletons rattling like old bones. Ned allowed no campfires now. They roasted stray hares over embers smothered in earth, swallowed smoke with half-raw meat. Sandor's grin glowed wolfish each time Arya scowled at the taste. Patrols of gold cloaks passed thrice, torches bobbing. Each time the wolves melted into briar thickets, breath white. The city's south walls loomed beyond, torches thick along battlements. From the bay drifted the groan of anchor chains. The Braavosi fleet, ironclad shadows against starlight. Ned crouched above a fold in the hills, studying a cluster of lighthouse fires. Brienne mapped watch rotations. Manderley longbowmen checked wind. At his signal, 36 shadows slid into ditches, crawling through frost-glistened Spartina. Arya wriggled ahead, a mouse in the wheat, to the base of the narrow-lipped Salaport rumored broken since Maegor's reign. Inside, a rusted grate surrendered under Sandor's pry bar. One by one they slipped into the belly of the Red Keep. Torchlight flickered off damp tunnel stone. Distant above, voices in High Valyrian. Braavosi captains trading jokes with sellsword brokers. A rank breeze bore tang of tar and salt and something fouler. Wildfire seeping. Ned's teeth clenched. To the ships, he breathed. They emerged in a forgotten armory, dust thick on racks of old Baratheon helms. Brienne donned one, visor down. Arya fitted an oversized brigandine, cinched tight. In the corridor, they became shadows among shadows. Outside, narrow steps wound to the mudgate's inner arch. Gold cloaks lounged on crates, passing a jug. Ned's left hand rose, a silent count. 3, 2, 2. Lanota. Karstark arrows hissed, cloaks toppled, jug shattering. Brienne and Sandor crossed steel to finish stragglers, then hauled the winch. The inner gate yawned. Riders burst from darkness. Manderley Marines herding captured Braavosi longboats to the quay. Wildfire casks lay stacked on wagons. Arya's torch ignited oil trails. Green fire whooshed sky high. Sellsail crews screamed as hulls blistered. A gout of emerald flame kissed the night. Reflection gleamed on Ned's gauntlet as he hacked free the last mooring rope. The burning barge drifted bayward, painting ghastly auroras. Horns brayed on ramparts, alarm clanged. Yet chaos reigned. Gold cloaks fought sellswords. Braavosi shouted for water. City watchmen seized buckets only to see them burst to boiling gas in wildfire spray. Amid pandemonium, Ned's wedge drove up cobbled slope toward Visenya's hill. The gate still open from earlier watch change. Manderley's barred pursuit with overturned fish carts spitting grease onto flames. In the great Sept yard, Sansa Stark stood in a swirl of frightened small folk distributing bread. She heard the uproar and turned as Ned crested the steps. Her eyes widened. For an instant, father and daughter were statues carved in wind. "Father," she breathed, voice cracking. Then she ran, skirts flying. Ned caught her, crushed her to smoke-soaked chest. Behind, Arya pelted up the steps. Sisters met in collision of arms, half laughing, half sobbing. Brienne, helm off now, watched with softened gaze. Sandor rumbled under breath. But the city still burned. Wildfire flames clawed across the bay. Cask after cask erupted like goblin fireworks. The Braavosi fleet, anchored too near, writhed in green conflagration. One galley cracked in half, spilling screaming sailors to boiling water. Panic roared through alleyways. Stannis banners rippled above the Red Keep. The king himself strode forth, crown askew, sword bare, flanked by Davos Seaworth. He took in Ned's soot-grimed host, the sisters' embrace, the jade inferno lighting the clouds. His mouth tightened into what might have been the ghost of a smile. Grim, brittle. "You struck first," he said, and struck true. "Tyrion's barrels now feed fish, not fire," Ned answered, panting. "Then the Iron Bank may reconsider its wager," Davos added. "A Braavosi admiral sinking his own fleet in our harbor. Bad trade." Stannis sheathed his sword. Yet Tywin marches still. And the wall's ravens foretell dead things born anew. "When winter collides with lion and ice, we will need every sword." He studied Arya, dirt-spattered, defiant, even small ones. Ned placed a hand upon his daughter's shoulder. "The pack survives." For once, the king inclined his head, conceding old words. 2 days later, ravens swarmed the city like black snowflakes. One bore robbed seal broken hastily. Victory at Ashmark. Tywin repelled. Sir Kevan slain. Hostages freed, though many lions roar. Marching east to crush the last sellswords. Relief rippled through the court. Fathers wept for sons spared. Yet other messages spoke of whites prowling last hearth's empty pigsties. Of a night sky in the far north, pulsing sickly green. In the Tower of the Hand, Ned convened a council. Mace Tyrell proposed a harvest festival to calm small folk. Bronze Jan demanded roads cleared of snow for Vale grain trains. Davos detailed ship losses, but pledged new galleys by spring. When voices dwindled, Ned produced a scroll sealed in black iron wax. The Night's Watch cry for aid, borne by Joan's own hand. The others mass at the gorge, it read. Ursus bears javelins of ice. Send every forging fire, every heart that beats, or dawn will rise only on corpses. Silence fell thick as cellar dust. Even Littlefinger, leaning in archway, ceased his idle quill tapping. Ned spoke into the hush. My lords, breaking the lion's teeth matters less than breaking the long night's jaw. Tywin will kneel when grain withers, under an endless moon. We ride north again before the last thaw. There. Stannis set palms upon the table. The crown rides with you. I will hold Dragonstone against storm or dragon. But my armies, what remains? March. Renly cleared his throat. And a breach. Margaery Tyrell stepped from gallery shadows, green silk rustling. The Reach will send seeds, she said, voice ringing, and swords to guard them until they're planted in spring soil. My grandmother says rose thorns cut knight's glove as sure as lion's pelt. Mace puffed but nodded assent, cornered by his own bloom. Thus it began. War's tide turning once more from gold and red to black and white. The kingdoms, ragged but breathing, aligned toward a darker horizon. That night Ned walked the ramparts of the Red Keep. Below, the bay steamed where wildfire still sputtered. Above, the sky glowed faint green, a haunting mirage. Catelyn joined him, fingers twining into his numb hand. Do you ever tire of choosing between terrors? She asked softly. Only when I forget whom I choose them for. A hush answered. Somewhere far off a dire wolf howled. Gray wind greeting the moon perhaps, or a ghost answering from frozen woods. Their song twined with wind until sky and earth seemed to share one breath. Catelyn laid her head on his shoulder. The pack survives, she whispered. Ned closed his eyes. He felt the old gods in the stones, in the snow-laden wind, in the heartbeat of the woman beside him, of the children sleeping beneath quilted mantles, of the realm itself trembling yet unbroken. Somewhere beyond the wall the night sharpened its spears of ice, but south of the wall fires burned, and men and women stood shoulder to shoulder. In that fragile seam between dark and dawn, Ned Stark found a sliver of quiet, bright enough to guide him through the storms still to come. He opened his eyes upon the sleeping city, upon torches guttering, upon a sky streaked with the first lean ribbons of scarlet dawn. Duty's weight remained, iron-bound, but beneath it a steadier pulse beat, love, stubborn and inexhaustible as winter. And in that pulse, he heard the promise that had carried him from Winterfell's snows to the throne rooms of kings, and back to the brink of night. The pack survives. E.K. Dawn broke slow and pale above King's Landing, crawling over the battered ramparts and the soot-stained towers of the Red Keep. Its light was wan, leached of all gold by a winter sky. But even the most meager sunrise was welcome after a night that had seemed to last a year. Snow lay heavy in the alleys below the walls. In the city's highest places, it had drifted up in thick humps like shrouds, muffling the chaos of the waking city. Smoke from the pyres on the Blackwater curled thin and blue. Each morning brought a reckoning. Tallies of dead, whispers of rationing, notes from the Night's Watch. Each morning Ned Stark read them with eyes that seemed to grow grayer by the day. In the council chambers, Stannis Baratheon sat beside Ned, his face more pinched than ever, his scepter tapping on the table with restless urgency. Davos Seaworth was there, salt in his beard, and the haunted look of a man who dreamt nightly of burning green. Mace Tyrell wore new furs and a hungry smile, but the lines around his eyes deepened each time Ned denied his schemes for price increases or monopolies on bread. Sansa and Arya had been sent away from the small council meetings after Arya suggested, too boldly, that Tyrell grain ships be searched for contraband. Littlefinger slouched in the shadow of a pillar, listening, watching, silent as a wraith. Brienne of Tarth stood by the door in full armor, helmet beneath her arm, the blue of her cloak dark with old stains. On the table lay a scatter of messages from every Lord Maester and Master of Coin from Old Town to White Harbor. It was the 7th such meeting since the wildfire firestorm and the destruction of the Braavosi fleet. The kingdom's wounds were deep, but not yet mortal. "The Wall's ravens," Ned began, "say the Whites move south in force. Wildlings join Jon Snow's command at the Fist. Giants march. It is no longer a tale to frighten children. We need the Vale, the Reach, the Riverlands, and the Stormlands to pledge every able spear and axe for the Wall." "Then," Mace pursed his lips, reluctant to promise men he'd rather keep for his own fields. "Harvest needs hands, my lord. The Reach feeds the realm. If I strip my lands, the city will starve come spring. If the Wall falls, there will be no spring," Davos rasped, voice like gravel. "The dead do not plant nor reap." Stannis looked from one to the next, his mouth a thin white line. "There is no choice. My brother's kingdom is spent. This is not conquest, but survival. Every ship, every sword, every bushel must go north. If not, I will take them." "Bani." Tyrell shifted, unhappy but nodded. "The Rose will answer the wolf and the stag." Ned made a mark on the list. "Lord Royce rides from the Eyrie with 3,000 men. Lady Mormont sends 500 from Bear Island. Robb marches east from Ashmark. Tully Spears join him from the rivers. I will ride north myself with every knight and archer that can still bear arms." A silence fell, heavy as snow. Even Littlefinger's smile faded. "And the Lannisters?" he asked softly. "The lion has licked his wounds, but the cub still bites. Gold flows from Lannisport to Braavos again." "We will watch them," Ned replied. "The time for secret knives is done. If Tywin stirs, he will find winter waiting at every pass." Stannis grunted, satisfied. "It will be enough. We ride in 3 days." Ned found Sansa on the Maidenval's balcony, shrouded in a heavy woolen cloak, her breath ghosting in the dawn. Arya was perched on the railing, legs swinging, boot heels kicking snow into the garden below. A black-haired dog, Arya's latest stray, sat pressed against her side, all ribs and attitude. The sisters had never seen more different. Sansa pale and tall, hands folded. Arya lean and sharp-eyed, face smudged with charcoal, her hair bound in a rough braid. He stood a moment, unseen, listening to their quiet. Sansa spoke first. "If Father rides north, we must help keep the city strong. The people trust our words as much as the king's." Arya shrugged. "If you want to be a lady, be a lady. I'll keep watch for knives and spies." Sansa's mouth tightened, but she nodded. "Lady Margaery taught me to see the kitchens as a battlefield. I will not let them hoard or steal." Arya patted her dog's head. "The alleys have more eyes than the throne room. I'll hear things you never will." Ned stepped forward. "Both of you speak sense. You will stay in the city until I return. The Red Keep's walls are old and strong, and Brienne will command your guard. Sansa, work with the Tyrells. Arya with the city's masters of coin and the watch. If the city is to stand, it must stand together." Sansa nodded, chin up. Arya grinned, eyes bright. For a moment, Ned felt an echo of Winterfell. His daughters, growing into women of the North. He kissed their brows in turn. "I am proud of you both. Keep each other safe." The muster outside King's Landing began at sunrise. A river of men in gray and white, green and gold, black and silver. Robb arrived with banners streaming, Grey Wind at his side, and the River Lords at his back. Tully, Blackwood, Bracken, Piper, Frey. Stannis men gathered in disciplined columns, banners furled in the snow. Davos oversaw the loading of grain and arms onto a fleet of battered ships, what remained after the wildfire inferno. Mace Tyrell sent a train of wagons stretching a league, piled with barrels and sacks and salted pork, though he grumbled at every load. Ned wore plain mail, a heavy cloak, and ice at his back. He stood before the men, the wind in his hair, and spoke in a voice that cut through the murmur of the host. "We ride to the Wall, not for glory or gold, but for all who live south of it. The dead come, and they do not parley. We are all the realm has left. When the snows melt, the bards may forget our names, but they will sing of what we did here. The pack survives. Men? The words rolled across the host, low but certain, as spears lifted and men thumped shield to chest. They rode north under banners torn and mended, wind snapping at their heels, the sun struggling to warm the world. Travel was slow and cold. Even with roads cleared, snowpack drifts high as a horse's chest, and the cold bit through wool and mail alike. Small folk came out from hamlets and crofts, waving, weeping, offering dried apples, weak beer, children clutching old dire wolf tokens or battered wooden stags. Sansa's name passed their lips as often as Robb's or Stannis. Her bread lines and calm voice in the city had become legend, a living hope for the hungry. At Harrenhal, the ruins smoldered, wind whining through scorched towers. The garrison, half mad from siege and cold, opened the gates at first sight of Ned's banner. The lords took counsel by firelight. Robb reported that Tywin's host was shattered. Ser Adam Marbrand dead, most of the sellswords fled. Arya returned from the woods with a pouch of coins. Braavosi gold, dropped by lion scouts running for the coast. Sandor grunted that the city's thieves had bolder hands than any hedge knight. Ned took time in the ruined Godswood to kneel at the stump of a heart tree, the weirwood blackened, but not yet dead. He prayed for the men lost at the God's Eye, for Bran and Rickon in the north, for Catelyn and his daughters. When he rose, Brienne stood nearby, watching the horizon. "The snow grows heavier," she said. "Giants are on the move. Scouts see their tracks, the dead are close." "We will not be found cowering," Ned answered. "We ride tomorrow." North of Moat Cailin, the land grew wild and cold. Robb's outriders found a company of Night's Watch men, ravaged, bleeding, clutching black swords and torches burning day and night. Their leader, Benjen Stark, limped forward to clasp Ned's arm. His beard was thick with ice, his face hollowed by exhaustion. "Jon holds the wall," he said. "The Whites came 3 nights ago. We broke them, but it cost us dearly. Sam Tarly sent a raven, says the dead-ride giants carry ice spears. The wall's fires burn all day. The wildlings stand beside us. We need more oil, more dragonglass, more hope." "There why?" Ned clasped his brother's arm. "You have it. Every man I could find rides behind me. Grain, arms, fire, and swords." Benjen's eyes glistened. "It may not be enough. We will make it enough." At the wall itself, the Black brothers cheered at the arrival of the host. Jon Snow met Ned atop the highest tower. His hair longer, eyes grimmer, sword at his hip. "They come," he said, voice quiet. "Not just whites, but others. Tall as kings, eyes blue as glacial ice. We've held them, but only with fire and steel. Longclaw has slain 2, but they keep coming." Ned embraced him. "You have done more than I could ever ask of any man. Tonight, I stand beside you." On the ramparts, Arya found Jon and grinned her wolfish grin. "You still fight like a cripple, Snow." He ruffled her hair, laughing. "If I do, the dead don't seem to mind." Brienne walked the wall with Sansa, showing her where to look for movement on the ice fields. Below, the campfires of the host burned in long lines. Robb's men drilled with Night's Watch archers. Tyrell's spearmen built more barricades. Manderley stacked barrels of lamp oil. The Vale's knights patrolled the flanks. Even the Hound, for all his scorn, built fires and checked walls. As night fell, the horns blew. Once, twice, then thrice. The dead were coming. They came from the north in silence. First a snowstorm, then a slow rippling line of figures moving through the swirling white, their eyes catching the firelight in cold blue flashes. At their head rode others, tall and thin, their blades like shards of moon. Behind, whites shambled, giants stomped, and somewhere, far back, a horn sounded, a sound that sent shivers up the spine of every living thing on the wall. Jon and Ned stood together atop the main gate, watching. "Signal the archers," Ned said. "When they cross the ditch, burn the field." Fire arrows streaked into the darkness. Oil pits erupted in towers of orange and red, throwing flickering light across the snow. Whites caught in the flames thrashed and burned, but others climbed over them, heedless. The first giants thundered against the wall's gates, hurling trees as battering rams. "Hold!" Robb shouted, his voice rising above the din. The wall shook with each blow, but the gates held. On the ice, others glided forward, their weapons glowing cold blue. One lifted a hand, and the flames guttered, snuffed by sudden cold. Ned saw it, and turned to Jon. "Now," he said. Jon raised Longclaw. Arya, beside him, raised Needle. Brienne and Sandor, side by side, lifted their blades. Behind them, men of the North and the Watch banged swords on shields, chanting, "Winterfell, Winterfell, Winterfell." Ned led the charge down the steps, ice held high. The first White to break through met a Karstark axe. The second fell to a Manderly spear. Brienne fought with a wild, relentless power, her sword flashing. Arya darted in and out, a streak of shadow, her little blade catching gaps in dead men's armor. Sandor hacked at a giant's ankle, ducked a frozen club, and planted his sword deep in undead flesh. Jon faced another, blade to blade, Longclaw against ice. The clash rang like bells on a winter morning. The other moved with impossible speed, but Jon parried, stepped in and drove Valyrian steel through its heart. The creature shattered, blue light flickering out. Ned faced another. The cold bit deep, slowing his limbs, but ice met the other's sword with a clash that split the night. He remembered the dance of years before. The slow, heavy arc, the pivot, the cut. This time, the other fell. Above, Sansa organized the archers, sending flight after flight of flaming arrows into the mass of Whites. The dead burned, the living cheered, but still they came. Endless, inexorable. On the flanks, wildlings and knights, Watch fought shoulder to shoulder, spears shattering, axes biting deep. Benjen led a charge that broke the enemy line, for a moment turning the tide. And then, with a cry like the cracking of the wall itself, the others retreated. The snowstorm eased. The dead stilled. On the field before the gate, the Whites collapsed, motionless as if strings had been cut. Dawn crept in, a thin line of pink and gold. Bodies littered the ice. Men sobbed and laughed, and everywhere Ned looked, the living outnumbered the dead. He climbed the steps to the top of the wall, breath steaming. Jon was there, Sansa and Arya beside him, Robb kneeling with a bandaged arm. The wind sang through the stones. "We held," Ned said. Jon nodded. "For now." Brienne joined them, bloodied but unbowed. "They will come again." Sansa gazed north, eyes wide. "But we will meet them. Every time." Arya grinned, fierce and tired. "Let them come. The pack survives." They watched the sun climb above the snow and the ice and the battered stones of the wall. Below, the realm stirred. It would never be the same. But in that quiet, on that cold morning, the North stood, bruised, battered, but unbroken. The weeks that followed were a litany of repairs, burials, and planning. Night's Watch ravens flew daily, calling for more dragonglass, more oil, more men. Sansa organized the wounded, Arya patrolled the walls. Robb and Jon drilled the men, while Benjen scouted far north, bringing word of white shadows slinking away into the deep woods. Brienne and Sandor led sorties to burn the bodies of the fallen, lest they rise again. Stannis and Ned held council in the old common hall, arguing logistics, alliances, and debts to be paid. The Tyrells sent new wagons. The Vale opened mountain passes for grain. In the city, Catelyn sent word that peace held, though the Lannisters massed on the western marches. One evening, as the sky burned orange above the white horizon, Ned stood atop the wall with Jon and Robb. They spoke of Bran and Rickon in the distant north, of Maester Luwin and the children of Winterfell, of all they had lost and all that still might be gained. The conversation wandered, quiet and low, from battles past to hopes for a spring that might yet come. "The world is changed," Jon said softly. "We have changed it, Ned answered. "But it is not done with us yet." They watched the last rays of sun vanish behind the mountains. The wind rose, cold and strong, but in it was the smell of pine and the faintest promise of growing things. Ned thought of Catelyn, Sansa, Arya, all those he loved. Thought of the future, uncertain but theirs. He rested his hand on ice and closed his eyes, feeling the wall beneath him, the strength of the pack around him, and a stubborn thread of hope winding through even the coldest night. As the months crawled on, the dead did return, but never in such numbers, and never again with the force of that first onslaught. The North watched, waited, and met each threat with steel and fire. Across the realm, the news spread. The wall had held. The North endured. Peace did not descend, but a kind of truce settled. The Lannisters licked their wounds and schemed. The Ironborn raided but found the coasts too well defended. In King's Landing, Sansa's name was spoken with reverence. In the North, Arya's became legend. In time, the bards would say that winter's fury was broken, not by heroes alone, but by families standing together, wolf, stag, and rose. And so the story unspooled. Each new dawn, another day survived. Each new winter, another test. But as long as the pack survived, there was hope. And so Ned Stark, Lord of Winterfell, Hand of the King and once king in name, stood beneath the ancient trees, beneath the rising sun, and listened to the wind as it sang the song of the North, the promise of a world that could begin again. And the frost lingered into the bones of spring. Even as the sun's pale light stretched longer each day, it seemed to reach through a veil of chill that would not lift. The wall's shadow, the cost of blood and fire, and the memory of the dead stalked every camp, every hearth from Last Hearth to King's Landing. Yet for all its trials, Westeros endured. A land not quite healed, but not yet broken. In the days after the great battle at the Wall, Ned Stark found himself the rarest of things. An old man in a realm ruled mostly by the young and the hungry. Every morning, as the first bells tolled in the Night Fort's battered chapel, he rose, layered on cloak and mail, and paced the high ramparts to look out over the endless white. There, Jon Snow joined him, now Lord Commander, his hair threaded with silver, his expression harder, older. Side by side, they watched the sun crawl up over a forest that still hid pockets of blue-eyed dead, but which had not vomited forth another army since the day the North stood together. Each morning Jon gave his report. The wildlings keep to their villages, and the spearwives send their sons to join the watch. Eastwatch trades with Braavos and the sisters, and the men from Hardhome mend boats to fish for all. Still, scouts vanished near the Milkwater. I sent Ghost and 6 brothers north to find them. Ned listened, nodded. What of the white shadows? No sign since the snows melted from the fist. But the old gods don't sleep, and neither should we. Most days, the report ended there. Sometimes Jon would turn, eyes dark, to ask after news from the south. The kingdom that Ned had fought to save, and which still frayed and stitched itself with every season. In King's Landing, Sansa Stark became the voice of the realm's conscience. Her council with Lady Margaery, old Olenna, and the wives of the Tyrell bannermen ran day and night, arranging shipments of grain, assigning orphan children to trades and noble households, gathering petitions from the street markets. She learned to read numbers, to hear lies in sweet words, and to answer with the kind of gentle firmness that bent every quarrel back toward peace. Brienne stood at her side, as sworn shield, taller and broader than most men, yet careful to let Sansa lead. Arya, often away, often near, slipped in and out of council like a shadow, delivering reports from the gutter, the docks, the merchant houses. Her network of informants spanned the city, and none dared cross her for fear of what secrets she might uncover. When Sansa spoke from the Iron Throne for the king in absentia, the great hall grew still. There will be no famines, not while we live. The grain of the Reach and the fish of the North are the blood of this kingdom, not its ransom. We tax those who would hoard or speculate, and reward those who share. She smiled only when the people smiled. The nobles soon learned, Gold might bend a city for a season, but only justice endured. Letters from Winterfell were read in council, each moon's turn. Bran, now lord, wrote of how the old gods whispered through the roots of the heart tree, how Rickon's voice echoed through empty halls, how the wolves and children of the north healed and grew, their bonds deepening in the quiet after war. In the north, the land thawed reluctantly. The snows melted from the hills, turning the rivers to torrents. Robb Stark's host, thinned by years of campaign, returned at last to Winterfell. The banners of the north rode behind him, Umber, Karstark, Manderly, Hornwood, and Glover, bleached by wind but still proud. Robb greeted his mother with a long, wordless embrace. He was changed. His hair shorter, his jaw thickened with a beard, his eyes bearing the memory of every man he'd lost, and every vow he'd kept. Grey Wind, scarred and lean, paced the walls again. Lady Mage Mormont and her daughters kept to the great hall, teaching the girls of Winterfell's spear and shield. Bran watched from the ramparts, leaning on a carved weirwood cane. His eyes saw far, sometimes rolling back to visions only he could interpret, of snows retreating, of roots deepening, of birds flocking south in search of green. Robb and his bannermen set about repairing Winterfell's battered towers and walls. Grain from White Harbor filled the storehouses. Herds were replenished, and the small folk, though wary, began to laugh again. Even the Ironborn raiders, remnants from Balon's last foray, were taken alive and set to rebuild the wharves and dikes they'd once burned. Catelyn walked to Godswood daily, her prayers silent, her resolve steel. Every evening, she wrote to Sansa, to Arya, to Bran. Sometimes she wept for those gone. More often she marveled at what remained. Word came from the west. Tywin Lannister, aged and bowed, retreated from public life to Casterly Rock, his power spent. Tyrion, cunning as ever, now governed in his stead, his council made up of new men. Knights of Lannisport, Braavosi merchants, Lady Forley Prester of Crakehall. The Golden Lion flew above the city, but the people whispered of the Dwarf King, who drank deep and spoke truth. The West paid its debts. Gold flowed into the treasury, but less than before. Old alliances with Braavos and Oldtown frayed. The Sellswords who had once threatened the Riverlands found new work as guards and caravan escorts. Their loyalty as shallow as their purses. Cersei Lannister, twice a captive and now an exile, remained a threat. Rumor placed her in the Free Cities, plotting vengeance, or hiding in Dorne under a false name. Her sons were gone. Joffrey lost to the Black Cells, Tommen fostered at Oldtown, Myrcella wed to a Martell, her loyalties uncertain. In Dragonstone, Stannis Baratheon brooded over maps and accounts, ever aware that the crown he wore came at the cost of half a kingdom's love. His queen, Salisa, and the Red Priestess, Melisandre, prayed daily for guidance. Davos Seaworth sailed the narrow sea, arranging grain shipments and new alliances. The royal fleet was rebuilt, the sailors drilled and sober. The Black Brothers and the Night's Watch received arms and ships and dragonglass, as Stannis sent north everything he could spare. Renly, kept close at court, led efforts to rebuild roads and repair bridges. The bannermen who once followed him returned to his side, more loyal now that ambition's fires had cooled. The lords of the Stormlands and Crownlands, sensing new order, pledged fealty, sometimes grudging, sometimes sincere. Stannis sent his own daughter, Shireen, to Winterfell to learn the ways of the North, and there she and Bran grew close, sharing stories of dragons and wolves, of prophecy and fate. As spring struggled into being, Arya slipped away from King's Landing and rode north, vanishing from Brienne's watch for weeks at a time. She journeyed alone, or with a handful of silent companions, sometimes in the guise of a hedge knight, sometimes as a serving girl, always listening, always learning. She returned with tales of Dorne, of sailors who claimed to have seen dragons flying in the east, of an ancient faceless god worshipped in the alleys of Oldtown. In time, even the Silent Sisters came to trust her with their secrets. In White Harbor, Wyman Manderly presided over the greatest feast since Aegon's day, a celebration for the survivors of winter. The hall brimmed with song and laughter, but even there, the memory of the dead was never far. On the high table, seats were left empty for the lost. The others never returned in force. Scattered bands of whites harried the wildlings and watch, but Jones' Rangers, now a company of hard, canny men and women, hunted them relentlessly. The wildlings became true subjects of the realm, their children learning the common tongue, their elders teaching the ways of the forest and the spear. Ghost, older now, but still deadly, ranged with John into the deep woods. Sometimes Bran would see them in his dreams. Ghostly shapes running beneath the trees, a shadow of red eyes and white fur, the living and the wild walking together. Benjen Stark was named First Ranger again, and though he seldom smiled, his presence steadied the wall. Gilly and her son became fixtures in Castle Black, her skill with herbs and children revered by all. Maester Aemon's memory was kept in the rebuilt library, where a new generation learned the old histories and read of a night when the dead had nearly won. Letters traveled back and forth, stitched together the fragile tapestry of Westeros. Sansa's hand grew steady. Her decrees signed with her father's wolf, her own graceful script. Bran wrote of old magic stirring in the north, of the children of the forest seen once again in the shadows of the weirwoods. Arya wrote the least, but when she did, it was always news of friends saved, of justice done, of hope carved from the knife's edge. Robb's letters were blunt, full of victories and worries. Bandits in the neck, ships off the shivering sea, petty lords squabbling over pastures and fiefs. He spoke more often of peace than of war. And with each moon his words grew more like his father's, slow, careful, but edged with the steel of winter. One evening, as the first crocuses pierced the snow in the gardens of King's Landing, Ned Stark sat in the godswood. He closed his eyes, feeling the pulse of life in the earth beneath him, the trickle of water beneath the roots, the whisper of old leaves in the wind. Sansa and Arya sat nearby, their hands twined, speaking softly. Brienne and Sandor watched from a distance, respectful. Even in the heart of the city, the heart tree endured. He remembered the words he had spoken to Jon on the wall. "We are the shield that guards the realms of men." He had meant it for the Night's Watch, but now he saw it was true for all the Starks, all of those who bore the old blood and the old burdens. The shield must sometimes bend, but never break. The pack must sometimes scatter, but never be lost. A city bell tolled. A child laughed in the street below. The wind carried the faint, sweet scent of new grass. Ned looked up at the sky and saw, at last, not a storm, but the slow bloom of spring's first light. The world was wounded, yes, but the north endured, the wall held, and the pack survived. In the spaces between grief and struggle, there was room for joy. And in the shadow of winter, the promise of another summer. As darkness fell, and the first stars pricked through the deepening dusk, Ned closed his eyes and breathed deep. He heard Sansa's soft words, Arya's laughter, the steady tread of guards on the walls, and far away, the lonely call of a direwolf. In that moment, he was home. The song was not ended. The story wound on, slowly, painfully, but onward all the same. For as long as the old gods endured, as long as hope and memory and duty remained, there would be Starks in Winterfell, and the realm would stand. So Ned Stark knelt beneath the heart tree, his children near, the pack unbroken. And he listened as the wind brought him the oldest words. The pack survives. Am Shamber. In the weeks after spring's first thaw reached the wall, the world changed in ways both profound and almost invisible. Even as the dead remained a memory, and the land itself seemed to breathe again. Westeros staggered, like a man rising after a wound, uncertain if he would limp or run. In the north, snowmelt raced down mountain slopes, swelling rivers and feeding new grass in the ghost-gray light of April. Every stream carried stories, of the wall that had not fallen, of Ned Stark's victory, of the children who ruled where kings once died. The Night's Watch no longer stood alone. Jon Snow, scarred and older, governed more than black-cloaked brothers. He commanded wildling spears, southern archers, even a handful of foreign sellswords who had seen the dark and chosen the light. Every watchtower from Eastwatch to the Shadow Tower now hosted hard-eyed men and women, black and brown and red of hair, speaking a score of tongues but united in vigilance. In the long, sunless nights, they told stories around new fires, how the living broke the dead, how the last other was shattered at dawn by steel and dragonglass, how giants fought for men and mothers, found missing sons among the ashes. Ned Stark walked the wall often. Some mornings he climbed alone to the highest tower, wind howling about him, his cloak a shadow trailing across the ice. Sometimes he was joined by Arya, pale and intent, her hair bound in a northern braid. Other times Sansa came, cloaked in blue, a small knot of letters in her hand for the south. Once, even Bran joined him, brought by cart, his eyes distant, cloud-gray and old beyond his years. Ned never said much. He would look out across the haunted forest, down at the camps on the southern side. Soldiers drilling, children running, new green poking through dirty snow. Sometimes he'd murmur, "There is no end to duty." But his eyes were softer now, as if he'd finally glimpsed hope after 1,000 nights of war. South of the wall, Robb Stark moved like a force of nature, everywhere and nowhere. When the snows began to retreat, Robb led the mending of roads, stamping out the last embers of lawlessness, clearing bridges, digging out villages lost to drift. Manderley grain, Tyrell apples, barrels of Stormlands fish all rolled northward on carts. Small folk, ragged and hollow-cheeked, waved as the king's son rode by. Sometimes with banners, sometimes alone, gray wind never far from his side. He was older now, lines cut deep by loss and labor. The voice of a king, the heart of a brother. Robb traveled the great houses, not as a conqueror, but as a judge. At Deepwood Motte he presided over the trial of a wildling raider who'd burned crofts to feed his kin. He spared the man, set him to labor, and the wildlings called him the Soft Wolf. At Barrowton, he negotiated a truce between two feuding northern clans, his words measured and heavy as stone. At White Harbor, he oversaw the betrothal of a Manderley daughter to a Tyrell cousin, sealing peace between Reach and North with a feast that lasted 3 days. His mother watched, pride and worry mingled in her eyes. Rickon returned from Skagos, wild and silent, 2 direwolves at his side. The people whispered of magic, of old gods smiling. But Rickon spent his days in the woods, hunting, rarely speaking but always near when storms rose or strangers came. In King's Landing, Sansa's rule was gentle but absolute. Her council expanded. Davos Seaworth, newly raised to Lord of the Rainwood, returned to advise on ships and trade. Sir Brienne, Lady Commander of the City Watch, marshaled blue-cloaked patrols that made the night safe again. Marguerite Tyrell oversaw gardens and orphanage, while the old Queen of Thorns whispered counsel none dared ignore. Arya moved in the shadows, slipping into kitchens and alleys, keeping peace in ways no lord could see. Spring's first markets bloomed in the city squares, baskets of apples, pots of honey, armfuls of wildflowers, cakes baked for the New Day festival. Sansa walked among the people, blessing children, listening to old women's tales, giving judgment where asked. She held court in the Great Hall, not from the Iron Throne but from a simple seat before the heart tree planted in the court of the Red Keep, roots watered from northern streams. "A throne is not a chair," she told a Braavosi merchant once. "It is the will of the people, and it must bend before it breaks." The Tyrells kept their bargain. Each moon, ships from the Arbor brought wine and grain. Dorne sent lemons, spices, new horses. The West, ruled now by Tyrion and a cautious council, sent silver and the promise of peace. The Riverlands healed, fields turning green under Edmure's careful watch. Only the Iron Islands remained restive. Occasional raids at sea, ships that vanished into fog. But Balon Greyjoy had died, and his heir, Yara, sued for peace, offering ships for grain. In Winterfell, the old gods whispered in the weirwoods, and magic seeped back into the land. Bran Stark, though crippled, rode the forests in wolf dreams, learning the secrets of roots and rivers. Raven messages became more frequent, their words sometimes riddles, sometimes warnings. "Do not trust the quiet," one said. for the storm remembers the pack. Catelyn Stark managed the keep. She taught the younger girls, Mormont, Reed, Hornwood, the ways of bread and blade, wove new banners, read each day from the histories. The maester's tower bustled with ravens. Every window glimmered with light late into the night. When Ned came home at last, weeks after the wall was secured, after the wildlings were given land, and the last of the dead were burned, he found Catelyn in the Godswood, hands muddy from planting. "I thought I might not see you again," she said, her voice only half a jest. He knelt beside her, brushing earth from her fingers. "Neither did I. But the world is stubborn, Cat. It wants to live." Memtero. She smiled then, more like a girl than a widow, and they sat beneath the old heart tree, roots deep in red earth, watching the light change. Rickon came running with his wolves. Bran watched with distant eyes, and for a long perfect moment, it felt as if peace might be possible. Elsewhere, new stories blossomed. In Old Town, Samwell Tarly, now a full maester, with chains of silver and black, opened the doors of the great library to wildlings, crannogmen, even Braavosi. He wrote the first history of the Long Night that named both the others and the free folk, and for it gained the thanks of the king and the grudging respect of his old father. In the far east, tales grew of Daenerys Stormborn, Queen of Dragons, Breaker of Chains, rebuilding a city across the sea. Some said she would return, some that her dragons slept, some that she was only a story. Arya listened to all, her eyes distant, her knife always sharp. The faith of the Seven and the old gods found common ground at last. In the towns of the Crownlands, septons and singers stood with woods witches at the planting of the first new trees, and in the north, ravens delivered copies of the new edicts. No man is judged by birth, but by deed. No woman is barred from counsel or sword. The wall is the realm's spine, but the north is its heart. Jon Snow traveled south only once, to present himself before Sansa and Stannis, to renew his vows. He declined lands and gold, keeping only the Black Cloak. Arya embraced him on the steps of the Red Keep, and Sansa wept. Stannis grunted. But when Jon had gone, he ordered a new Hall of the Night's Watch be raised in every royal city, each with its own glass candle, burning bright. The years slipped by, and peace took root. Famine faded, though it left scars. Old men limped. Old women muttered about the cold that had killed so many. Children learned new songs, ones about wolves and stags and roses sharing the same green field. No one forgot the war, but the stories softened. Kings became brothers. Traitors became penitent. The living honored the dead. One summer day, as the barley fields rippled gold outside Winterfell, Ned Stark sat beside the hearth in the great hall, a letter from Sansa open on his knee. "My lord hand," it read. "The small folk ask that we build a garden beside the heart tree, for memory and for hope. I have sent for seeds from Dorne and the Vale, from the Riverlands and the north. When you visit, you must plant the first sapling yourself." He read the letter twice, smiling. Arya and Bran came in with Rickon, bickering gently, their voices filling the hall. Catelyn entered, kissed his brow. A hound barked outside, and the smell of fresh bread drifted in with the breeze. Ned folded the letter and rose, ice strapped at his side. "The pack survives," he said quietly. The words were a benediction, an old promise renewed. In the courtyard, the children played. The banners of 1,000 houses fluttered from the towers. Wolf and trout and bear and rose. The wind from the north was cool, but it carried the scent of green, of new things growing. In the Godswood, the old tree waited. So the days turned, and the world remade itself. Not with the clash of swords, but with slow forgiveness and the stubborn hope of those who'd lived through the storm. In the end, it was not crowns nor swords that saved the realm, but the will to begin again. And as long as the pack survived, as long as children laughed in Winterfell, and the wall held firm against the dark, the story continued. Quiet, hopeful, ever turning toward the light. The pack survives. Ka. Summer at last broke the back of winter. It was not the riot of green that the Reach would have known, nor the sweet perfumed heat that the Dornish craved. In the north, the snow melted in stubborn patches, leaving the world damp and thick with the smell of old earth. New grass crept up in the shadow of Winterfell's walls. The white night flooded the meadows, carrying with it the bones of the dead and the hope of a kingdom washed clean. To the south, the roads were passable again. In every hall, great and small, people who had starved or shivered or wept for the fallen now let themselves imagine harvests, weddings, the laughter of children. The pack endured. Ned Stark's beard was silver now, his hair cut short, the lines at his eyes as deep as the canyons in the Vale. He had survived 3 winters of war, famine, and a darkness older than his name. He spent his mornings in Winterfell's rebuilt Godswood, kneeling beneath the great heart tree as the red leaves unfurled again. Each day, he gave thanks for his children, for Catelyn, for the living who had come home, and for those lost who haunted his dreams with less pain than before. He still heard the dead in the wind sometimes, but their voices did not trouble him as they once had. He remembered every lesson. The feel of snow on steel, the weight of ice, the screams of wights falling beneath fire and dragonglass, the sighs of those he'd failed to save. He remembered Jon's face, no longer a boy, but Lord Commander and legend, and Arya's wild grin as she slipped away at dawn, her sword at her hip, her laughter echoing in the stables. He remembered Sansa's gentle hands, shaping the council and the city. He remembered Robb's quiet strength, Bran's silence, Rickon's wildness. He remembered home, and was content. The walls still stood, and the watch endured. But they were changed. Jon Snow, his hair shot through with gray, led men and women of every clan. The wildlings built villages at the foot of the wall, their children playing with the black-cloaked sons of lords. Ranging was common now, and the haunted forest was less haunted, though some things were never found. Stories of the others were already slipping into legend, half believed by the new recruits. Samwell Tarly, his chains heavy with links, kept the histories. He wrote of the dead and the living, of the kings and queens who had knelt to each other, of a world saved by the stubbornness of old hearts. Every year, the Watch sent a company south, an honor guard, their best, to stand before the lords and renew their vow. "We are the shield." Sansa Stark herself would meet them at the city gates, Marjorie Tyrell at her side, and together they would walk up the King's Road to the Heart Tree, planted in the Queen's Garden. There, in the sight of small folk and noble alike, Jon would kneel, and Sansa would take his hand and speak the old words. "So long as the pack survives, so does the realm." In King's Landing, the Red Keep gleamed brighter than it had in memory. Sansa's reign was marked by quiet prosperity, not splendor. Taxes were low, and no one starved. She sat on the Iron Throne only for ceremony, otherwise presiding from the open gardens or the small council chamber. Davos Seaworth, grayer and thinner, was her hand, wise with the scars of war and the salt of the sea. Brienne of Tarth remained sworn to Sansa, but now commanded the Queen's Guard, and her laughter, quiet but true, was often heard when she trained the pages and squires. The small council was a marvel. The old Queen of Thorns, half blind now but sharp as ever. Lady Shireen Baratheon, gentle and bookish, who managed trade with Lys and Pentos. Lord Gendry Baratheon, called up from Storm's End, who spoke for the small folk and the smiths. Sir Podrick Payne, who kept the treasury, an area who never took a seat, but listened from the shadows, reporting what the council missed. No one plotted, not seriously. Those who tried soon learned their letters were read, their accounts checked, and their misdeeds known. The city was as safe as it had ever been. Sansa allowed the faith their pageantry, and the old gods their groves. Once a moon, the children of the small folk were brought to the Red Keep to listen to songs and stories. Some tales were of dragons, some of dire wolves, some, noticed with pride, of lords and ladies who had chosen mercy when vengeance was easier. Robb Stark returned to Winterfell after 3 years on the road. He had been king, general, judge, and peacemaker. Now, with peace upon the land, he came home as Warden of the North, a title that sat more easily on his shoulders. He brought with him Lady Sybil Manderly as his wife, their first child a girl with bright blue eyes and a voice that could outshout gray wind. The wedding was held in the Godswood, and every lord of the north attended. No southern banners flew, but messages arrived from every corner of the realm. The feast lasted 5 days. Meat, fish, bread, and barrels of ale. Old John Umber led the toasts. Mage Mormont arm-wrestled wildlings, and the children raced in the bailey, scattering chickens and dogs. Bran watched from the ramparts, smiling. Rickon rode in on a shaggy pony, the dire wolves bounding ahead. For a time there was only laughter, and the hard years seemed distant. Robb ruled with care. He rebuilt the castles burned in the wars, saw to it that orphans found homes, and made peace with the wildlings who stayed. He was a just lord, and when he passed through the villages, the small folk cheered. His bannermen learned to listen. He had no patience for feuds, and when disputes came, he often summoned Sansa or Arya for counsel, knowing their wisdom matched his own. Bran grew quieter as the years passed, but his gifts deepened. He spoke rarely, but the words were weighted with something beyond age. Some said he could see through the eyes of crows or wolves, and that the trees themselves whispered to him. He grew close to Shireen Baratheon, who visited each spring and fall. The two of them lost in the library for hours, trading riddles and dreams. Rickon, wilder than ever, became a master of the hunt, but also learned the old stories and taught the children to respect the forest, not fear it. Catelyn watched her family with a joy she had never known in the long years of war. She corresponded with Samwell Tarly, with Margaery in the south, and with Lady Mormont on Bear Island, her words shaping alliances and friendships from one end of Westeros to the other. She grew old, but strong, her voice carrying in the hall, her laughter still the sound that called the family to table. Arya left and returned as she pleased. Sometimes she was seen in the halls of the Red Keep, sometimes in Braavos, sometimes in the Riverlands or the North. She traveled the world, a legend even as she lived. She never spoke of her journeys, except to tell the children wild tales. Of ships that sailed past the edge of the maps, of cities of glass and fire, of assassins who could change their faces and bards who sang of wolves across the sea. When she grew tired, she returned to Winterfell, sleeping in the same bed she had shared with Sansa as a child. Her sword needle hung above the door. She was happiest in the wild, but she never forgot her pack. In the west, Tyrion Lannister's council kept peace. Gold was scarcer, but there was no hunger. Cersei was a memory, her plots defeated, her exile complete. Tommen wrote poems from Old Town, Myrcella rode with the Martells, and no one missed the old ways. The west grew quieter, its lords content to trade and watch from afar. Stannis Baratheon grew old in Dragonstone. He visited court less often, his voice thinning, but his sense of justice sharp as ever. His daughter Shireen became his legacy, a gentle peace, not a warlike crown. The realm remembered his hard rule, but loved him for his final gift, a kingdom with laws, not fire. Dorne prospered. Lady Nymeria Sand, once a shadowy daughter, became Princess of Sunspear, ruling with patience and cunning. She sent her own daughters to court at King's Landing, and the Dornish grew more trusted, their words less edged. The Ironborn were restless, but Yara Greyjoy kept them in check. She visited White Harbor once each year, paid homage to Sansa, and brought a shipload of salt and pearls as tribute. As the years passed, the land bloomed again. Winters were short and mild. Crops flourished. The people of Westeros remembered the hard times, and so they planned. Every castle kept full stores, every lord maintained roads, every holdfast drilled its archers and spears. The pack survived, and because of it, so did the realm. One spring day, in the 10th year since the fall of the Long Night, all the great houses gathered at Winterfell. The north was flush with green, and the white knife ran clear and cold. The occasion was simple, a wedding, but more than that, a feast for peace. Robb's daughter wed the heir of House Reed. Lords and ladies came from Old Town and the Vale, from the Reach and the Riverlands. Samwell Tarly arrived with Gilly and their children. Sansa came north with a great train from King's Landing. Arya, wild-haired and sunburned, arrived the night before, her horse lathered and thin. The Queen of Thorns was gone, but her kin toasted her memory. Gendry Baratheon stood for the Stormlands, his smith's hands scarred but proud. Shireen Baratheon Bran Stark presided over the wedding, their words strange and lovely. Ned Stark, now truly old, watched from the solar. His hair was white, his back bent, but his eyes saw more than ever. He sat with Catelyn, their hands entwined, and watched as the next generation danced below. He saw Sansa, regal and kind, Arya laughing with a stranger from Braavos, Robb, smiling as he welcomed each guest, Rickon, wild at the edge of the feast, Bran, silent but radiant, Shireen, gentle and wise. The lords and ladies of the realm mingled, their quarrels forgotten, at least for a day. As dusk fell and the candles were lit, the hall rang with song. Bards sang of the pack and the storm, of the wall that stood, of the queen who ruled justly, of a world remade by the choices of a few. Ned squeezed Catelyn's hand. "We have come through fire and winter," he said softly. "We have lost much." She smiled, tears in her eyes, and gained more than we dared hope. Outside, the wolves howled, deep, echoing through the trees, a sound older than stone or steel. Inside, children laughed and the banners of wolf, rose, stag, and trout fluttered together in the candlelight. It was not a perfect world, but it was theirs. The story wound onward, each new day another page, each season another stanza in the Song of the North. In the Godswood, the heart tree stood, silent and ancient, its roots deep, its branches spreading. The pack survives. The pack endures. And so, in the end, does hope. A.K. The sun crested the towers of Winterfell, its rays gilding slate roofs and shimmering in the dew that clung to grass and cobble. The banners of the great houses hung motionless in the still morning air, direwolf, trout, bear, kraken, rose, and sun. In the courtyard, small folk and highborn mingled in anticipation, laughter and nervous whispers swirling together, the sound as steady as the heartbeat of a living house. It was the first day of summer's festival, called by Queen Sansa from King's Landing and Warden Robb from Winterfell, a gathering to mark a decade since the Wall had held against the dead and the long peace that followed. For many children in the crowd, it was the first memory not of hunger or fear, but of music, sweetmeats, and stories told around new fires. Ned Stark sat beneath the heart tree in the Godswood, the red leaves casting shadows across his face. His body had grown thin, his hands veined and rough, but his eyes were clear and fierce as ever. Catelyn sat beside him, her hair gone silver, her touch gentle and certain as always. All around them, the castle echoed with the life they had fought for, a realm united, however uneasily, in the memory of all that had been lost and won. Robb arrived first, his gait sure and limping at once, reminders of old wounds, trophies of survival. He knelt beside his father and mother, pressing his forehead to Ned's hand, the gesture wordless and reverent. Grey Wind was gone, but a new direwolf, dark as midnight, trotted at his side, eyes bright and playful. Sansa entered the Godswood with the grace of a true queen. Her gown was the pale blue of northern skies, her hair coiled in a coronet, her voice soft but commanding as she greeted her parents. She brought news of the South, of festivals on the King's Road, of trade flowing from Old Town to the Wall, of Dorne and the Reach sending delegations not seen since before Robert's Rebellion. Arya returned last, slipping through the shadows at the edge of the trees, her clothing plain and travel-stained, a long sword slung across her back and needle at her hip. She moved with a panther's ease, her eyes quick, her smile wide and wild. She knelt too, but then she embraced her mother and father fiercely, heedless of ceremony. Bran, older now, thinner still, watched from a wooden chair carried by Hodor's son and flanked by Maester Samwell Tarly, who had come from Old Town for the festival. Bran's face was serene, the mark of otherworldly sight and deep contentment. Rickon, tall and shaggy-haired, stood behind them, two gray wolves at his knees, his own brood of wild children tumbling in the grass. In that circle of family, the years fell away. Ned felt the warmth of Catelyn's hand, the press of his children's fingers, the hush of the godswood. For a moment, he was a younger man, and the shadow of the Tower of Joy was only a distant memory. When the bell tolled noon, the Starks walked together through the gates into the castle yard. Trumpets sounded, banners unfurled, and the festival began. The days passed in a riot of color and sound. In the mornings, the fields were filled with games: archery, races, the clash of practiced swords. Lords and ladies judged competitions, and small folk from across the north took part. Bran presided over a contest of riddles, his eyes sparkling when a wildling girl bested a maester from the Vale. Arya sparred with squires and knights, quick as shadow, leaving all grinning or red-faced by turn. Sansa and Margaery Tyrell crowned the winners with garlands of wildflowers. At midday, the kitchens filled the air with the scent of roasting meat, honey cakes, and fresh bread. The people dined together, high and low, and the laughter grew ever louder. At one meal, Gendry Baratheon, Lord of Storm's End, sat side by side with Wyman Manderly and Nymeria Sand of Dorne, sharing tankards of ale, their children racing beneath the tables. In the afternoons, songs and stories wove through the castle. Bards played, singers told tales of the long night and the summer that followed. Samwell read from his great book of histories, his voice steady and kind, the children hanging on his every word. Sansa herself recited the story of her own journey, the Red Keep, the loss, the hope, the rebuilding. At dusk, the bells rang again, and the people gathered in the great hall. There was music and dancing, candles glowing, laughter rising with the smoke. Robb and Sabelle Manderly led the first dance, and soon the hall was awash in spinning color. Bran watched with quiet joy, while Rickon and his children slipped outside to run with the wolves beneath the moon. On the third night, when the music faded, Arya led a silent procession into the godswood. Each carried a candle and set it among the roots of the heart tree, their faces upturned in the red and white light. For a moment, the only sounds were the wind and the distant howl of a wolf. Ned spoke softly, remembering the dead, the lost, the sacrifices made. Then, in a voice stronger than any had heard from him in years, he said, "The pack survives. Not all the days were light, nor all the laughter easy. The lords of the north and the Riverlands argued, as they always had, over borders, grain, the price of peace. Yara Greyjoy arrived from the Iron Islands with her own fleet and a retinue of salt wives. Her pride sharp, but her respect for the Starks genuine. Tyrion Lannister, older and thinner, came as envoy of the West, his wit as quick as ever, but his smiles touched by a deep and quiet grief. There were rumors from beyond the narrow sea, of dragons in the east, of kingdoms rising and falling, but these were only stories, told to frighten or inspire. In the evenings, the small council met beneath the weirwood boughs. Sansa, Robb, Arya, Bran, Catelyn, Maester Samwell, and their closest advisors. They spoke of alliances, of trade and crops, of the Wall and its watch. They debated what justice meant in a realm that had survived so much, and how best to teach the next generation that peace was not a gift, but a work forever renewed. Bran, now known as the Dreaming Wolf, spoke rarely but with weight. The old gods stir. Magic remains in the roots and rivers, in the hearts of men. Do not let it fade into story alone. Remember the night. Remember the dawn. Sansa kept the faith of her people, opening the gates to any who sought justice, healing, or hope. Arya wandered the wild, seeking out those who fell through the cracks. A crippled squire, a bastard girl, a wildling boy with haunted eyes, bringing them home or setting them on their way. Robb patrolled the roads and villages, settling feuds, rewarding bravery, reminding every house that they were one pack, not scattered loners. Samwell expanded the library, sending letters to Old Town, Bravos, even the far-off Summer Islands, gathering knowledge. Rickon led hunts, kept the peace with wildlings and new settlers, his laughter echoing in the woods. As the festival drew to a close, a rainstorm swept in, cold and clean, washing the dust from the stones. The people huddled in the halls, sharing stories, making new friends, dreaming new dreams. On the final day, the sun returned. The great houses gathered in the yard. Sansa spoke before all, her voice clear and unwavering. Once, we survived by sword and shield, by fire and ice. But now, let us survive by kindness, by courage, by the will to begin anew. Let this be the summer remembered, not for what we lost, but for what we built together. The people cheered. Children raced beneath the banners. The old songs rose again. In the Godswood, Ned Stark knelt, his family beside him, the world quiet for a moment. He looked up at the heart tree, its leaves flickering in the breeze, and he saw not the faces of the dead, but the promise of those yet to come. Sons and daughters, friends and strangers, all bound together by the stubborn grace of survival. And as the sun set, painting the sky in gold and crimson, he whispered the words that had carried him through darkness into light. The pack survives. And the story went on. Kal. As the golden dusk of the festival's last day settled across Winterfell's towers, the world felt poised in rarest harmony, caught between remembrance and renewal. The laughter of children floated on the mild wind, mingling with the lowing of distant cattle, the creak of wagons heading for distant villages, and the chime of silver bells sewn into the hems of festival cloaks. From atop the walls, Ned Stark watched the mingling crowds in the yard, merchants bartering beside lords, wildlings dancing with the daughters of Karhold, the old and the young drawn together by music and memory. The sun's last rays slanted through the open gates, painting the snowmelt in liquid fire. Inside the great hall, Sansa presided over a table laden with the bounty of the realm. She smiled at every guest, her eyes missing nothing, her laugh ringing clear. Beside her, Margaery Tyrell spoke softly with the Queen of Sunspear, their words low and warm, and on the far end of the table, Davos Seaworth, Lord Hand, entertained the Stark children with stories of storms and sea monsters. Arya slipped between shadow and torchlight, never seated for long, always vanishing to greet old friends. An orphaned baker's daughter, a scarred sellsword, a child from the Vale who dreamed of knighthood. She wore no jewels, only needle, and her freedom, and it was enough. Robb toasted each house in turn, to the Manderlys for bread, to the Tullys for rivers, to the Tyrells for green and gold, to the Martells for fire, to the Lannisters for peace, to the pack, may it outlast every winter. The hall thundered with approval. Gendry Baratheon raised his tankard, Podrick Payne blushed at a jest, and Yara Greyjoy clapped her cousin's back, her laughter loudest of all. Rickon's children played at the hearth, watched by the direwolves. Bran, pale and remote, watched from the shadows, eyes reflecting both the room and some distant green dream. Samwell Tarly read aloud a letter from Oldtown, news of a new ship built to brave the sunset sea, its captain a woman whose ancestors once followed Nymeria. All was peace. All was promise. When the music began, it was the Bear and the Maiden Fair, a song older than the halls themselves. Sansa danced with Lord Royce's youngest, Robb with Sybil, Arya with the children, and even Bran's chair was wheeled into the dance, a circle forming around him that broke the last barrier between sorrow and joy. Old faces joined the circle: Lord Wyman Manderly, Lord Hoster's great-granddaughter, Lady Meg's surviving daughter, Dornish knights and Lannister cousins, the next generation of a realm reborn. Late in the evening, as torches flickered low, Sansa rose to speak. 10 years ago, we stood on the edge of darkness, and the wall held because every house gave what it could. Courage, grain, swords, hope. We are here because we learned not to fear each other, but to trust that the world is wide enough for every song. I was a girl then, dreaming of heroes. I am a queen now, and I know that heroes are made in kitchens and fields and alleys. She lifted her cup. To the pack, and to all who would join it. The toast swept the room. In that instant, it seemed every old hatred, every bitter feud, faded into the music and the warmth. Even Tyrion Lannister, watching from the shadows with a tired but genuine smile, raised his cup and met Robb's gaze in friendly challenge. The days after the festival were days of slow return. Wagons rolled out of Winterfell's gates, some south to the Neck, some east to White Harbor, some west to the hills where the sun lingered long. Lords and ladies rode in companies, their banners streaming. Their retinues swelled with small folk who had tasted hope and wished to carry it home. Sansa and Robb stood at the gates, bidding each group farewell, each departure another thread woven into the great tapestry of the North. Arya rode out with the Manderleys for a time, then vanished down the White Knife, her trail marked by rumor alone. Bran withdrew to the Godswood, Samwell beside him, both intent on the mysteries of roots and ravens. Rickon, wild and grinning, led hunts to the edge of the world, his children scattering laughter in their wake. Within Winterfell's rebuilt halls, Ned and Catelyn found a new kind of peace. They spent mornings walking the walls, pausing to greet every sentry, every maid. At midday, Catelyn would sit in the solar, reading letters from Sansa and Arya, Robb and Bran, Maester Sam, and even Tyrion, whose notes were clever and cutting. In the afternoons, Ned visited the armory, watched young men and women learning sword and bow, always reminding them, a blade is a tool, but mercy is a choice. Each evening, they dined together, sometimes only family, sometimes with friends and allies who lingered after the festival. Sansa often remained for weeks, her son toddling at her feet. Arya came and went, as she always had. Bran was quieter than ever, his mind straying, but his smile more present when Catelyn told tales of his childhood. Robb, now lord in truth, shouldered the burdens of the North, but he did not bear them alone. Catelyn marveled at what they had built. She wrote to Margaery in Highgarden, "I feared once that our family would vanish, broken by pride and winter. Yet here we stand, older, battered, but together. It is a different kind of victory. It is enough." In the south, the world moved more slowly. Queen Sansa's council grew, young men and women from every corner of the realm. Podrick Payne taught the sons of merchants to read. Lady Shireen led lessons on ships and tides. Margaery guided gardens that fed every orphanage and sept. Gendry oversaw the city's forges, his arm strong as ever. The Queen's justice was swift but fair. Thieves sent to the watch, traitors to exile, no heads taken that did not deserve it. Sansa's son, little Eddard, grew bold and curious. He climbed walls, learned swords with Arya, diplomacy with his mother. He was as stubborn as a Stark, as clever as a Tyrell, and as beloved as any prince could hope to be. From Oldtown, Samwell's letters described the construction of a vast new library, open to all, funded by gifts from the north and the west. The Iron Bank of Braavos loaned coin not for war, but for roads, bridges, and aqueducts. The faith, reformed after a generation of chaos, focused on charity and healing. The High Septon, a quiet man chosen from the Sept's own orphanage. Rumors still came from across the sea, of dragons sighted above the Dothraki Sea, of a Targaryen queen gathering ships. Sansa read these letters by candlelight, her face grave, but she did not send for armies. "Let the world come to us in peace," she told her council. "We have learned what war brings. We have not forgotten how to defend ourselves, but let us not seek enemies where there might be friends." As seasons turned, new customs blossomed. Each autumn, a harvest gathering was held at Moat Cailin, lords and commoners sharing food and news. In spring, every holdfast planted a new tree, a promise that life would return. In the Riverlands, boats filled the rivers again. In the west, gold bought craftsmen instead of swords. In Dorne, children learned both the spear and the pen. The Wall was never forgotten. Jon Snow, though his hair had grown white, still rode its length, still held counsel with the wildlings, the Watch, the Free Folk. Arya visited sometimes, bringing news of the far north, stories of white bears and sea wolves, and the last haunted places. Bran, in his visions, saw dangers yet to come, but they were distant, the world's old wounds slowly knitting. Ned wrote often to Jon, "Remember the old words, and trust your heart. Guard the realms of men, but do not forget that men can change. You have changed us all, and for that, the world is less cruel." The years passed. Gray hair crept across brows once dark. Laughter deepened in old throats. Children grew, Houses mingled, some old hatreds buried with those who clung to them. Winter came and went, each time less terrible than the last. On the 20th summer since the long night, Winterfell welcomed another gathering. The birth of Robb's granddaughter, the betrothal of Arya's ward to a wildling chief, the return of Queen Sansa from the capital. Her son now a young man. Samwell Tarly brought new books. Podrick, a cask of Arbor gold. Margaery, a basket of rare seeds. Yara, a pearl from the sea. Tyrion, older and slower, sent a clever mechanical bird that flapped and sang. This time, Ned watched from a bench in the Godswood, Catelyn beside him. Their grandchildren danced among the roots. The wolves sprawled in dappled sun. Bran, Shireen, and Samwell read stories aloud, the old and the new mingling beneath the red leaves. Robb stood at the gate with Sansa and Arya welcoming the guests. Some old, some young, all part of the pack. Rickon's children raced through the grass, yapping like pups. As dusk fell, the feast began. Songs rose, of winter survived, of peace won and guarded, of old gods and new promises. Sansa lifted her glass and called the ancient words. The pack survives. And when the candles burned low, Ned leaned into Catelyn's shoulder, feeling the warmth of her beside him, and the comfort of family close. He listened to the laughter, the song, the steady rhythm of the north, and felt in his bones the deepest peace of all. He closed his eyes, and the heart tree whispered in the wind. The pack survives, and so does hope. This story did not end. The next day began, and in Winterfell's heart, the world endured.